Good evening. I would like to call this meeting to order at 7:04 p.m. Welcome to the May 28th, 2024 City of Burlingame Planning Commission meeting. For all in attendance today, please note that this Planning Commission meeting is being held in person and using the Zoom webinar format. This meeting is also being streamed live on YouTube and will be uploaded to the city's website. Please note that we are not accepting remote public comment during commission meetings. We ask that the public either attend the meeting in person to comment or send an email to publiccomment@burlingame.org. Staff will be monitoring emails submitted during the meeting, which will be read at the appropriate time. The length of the emailed comment should be commensurate with the 3-minute customarily allowed for verbal comments. Agenda item number 2, roll call. The record should note that 6 members of the commission are present this evening. Commissioner Horan is absent. Agenda item number 2A, rotation of officers.
Yes, this evening we will have Chair Sean Lowenthal will be chair for the next coming year, and Vice Chair will be Chris Horan. He is absent this evening, and Secretary will be Walker Shores. For this evening, since Commissioner Horan is not here with us, Commissioner Shores will be acting Vice Chair. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Ruben. Agenda item number 3, request for AB 2249 remote participation. There are no commissioners participating remotely this evening. Agenda item number 4, approval of the minutes. We have meeting minutes to review and approve this evening from the May 13th, 2024 regular Planning Commission meeting. Do we have any comments, changes, or discussion regarding the minutes? Do we have any motions regarding the minutes?
I move to approve minutes from, well, where were they from? May 13th. Thank you very much.
I'll second.
Okay, great. We have a motion by Commissioner Pfaff and a second by Commissioner Schmidt. Could we have a roll call vote?
Commissioner Camarado,
Aye.
Commissioner Pfaff,
Aye.
Commissioner Schmidt,
Aye.
Commissioner Say,
Aye.
Acting Vice Chair Shores,
Aye.
Chair Lowenthal.
Aye. Motion passes 6-0-0-1. Agenda item number 5, approval of the agenda. Staff, are there any changes to the agenda?
There are no changes from staff.
Do we have any recusals?
Yes, I will be recusing from item 9D as we're the project architect.
I will be recusing from, I don't know which item is 124 Bloomfield, whatever that is.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Agenda item number 6, public comments, non-agenda. Members of the public may speak about any item not on the agenda. Members of the public wishing to suggest an item for a future Planning Commission agenda may do so during the public comment period. The Ralph Brown Act, the state local agency open meeting law, prohibits the Planning Commission from acting on any matter that is not on the agenda. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes each. Do we have any members of the public attending in person who wish to speak on any item that is not on our agenda? Seeing none, do we have any public comment emails?
No public comment emails for non-agendized items.
Great, we will move on to agenda item number 7, study items. Item 7A, update of the Burlingame Municipal Code Chapter 11, trees and vegetation.
Good evening, Chair Lowenthal and fellow planning commissioners. My name is Richard Holtz. This is my first time in front of your commission. I serve as your park superintendent and city arborist, and have had the pleasure of working with our city attorney's office and assistant city attorney Spansale on this update. Quick background, this update began in 2018 under a different city attorney's office, a different city arborist, and we've spent the last year trying to massage things to the point where we can come to council with actual ordinance language. We're still very much in the public information gathering phase where we have these concepts that we think would be great to update our municipal code, but we still want to make sure we get public comment, commissioner input, and of course our city council as well. What we've primarily been doing is looking at some of the challenges that we've had over recent years, and then what are other jurisdictions doing with their trees as well. Could you change the slide? Thank you. So why do we need to update our code? Some aspects of our code haven't been updated in 25 or even 52 years now. That has not kept the pace with current arboriculture standards. It also doesn't follow industry practices in some ways. If you can imagine when you were growing up, for those of you who are older than 50, the way tree care occurred back then was a lot different than it is now. There's a lot of science that is gone into the background and research, and a lot of care that goes into maintaining these trees for generations going forward. It also limits the available tools that we have for the city to adapt to changing needs. We certainly saw in the winter of 2023 that we needed to adjust right away with the storms that we were enduring, and how can we best address that going forward. Our ordinance is meant to be our framework. We have our urban forest management plan, and we certainly have our policies and, of course, resolutions from the council, but that all needs to fit into the framework of what our ordinance will be. Part of the problem of not keeping up is we currently have a 1-for-1 ratio. So if you remove a large redwood tree out of someone's backyard, 100 feet tall, you can replace it with a small tree that's about this size. That's not an equitable replacement to account for the loss of our community, of what the benefits of that tree are. And I'll talk more in detail as we move forward, and I'll try to move fast because I know you have a lot of things on your agenda tonight. But if you have any questions as we go along, please feel free to me. And this doesn't occur too often, but it also hasn't been an effective deterrent in deterring some wrongdoers. And in the most egregious of cases, we want to increase penalties for those folks who are knowingly doing wrong. Next slide, please. So this last November 2023, we actually took some of our concepts out into the public, and we met with the Beautification Commission in early November, the City Council in late November, and then recently, earlier this month, again back at the Beautification Commission. I'm sorry we omitted your commission back in November, but glad to be here now. These are some of the comments that we had heard from the community. An alarming concern about the rate at which protected trees are being approved for removal. Tree removals approved due to development, and really that's what we're going to hone in tonight, because that's your parameter, that's your wheelhouse there. What the public involvement is in the removal process, appeals, notification. We have included the concept of an appeal fee. There's significant staff time that goes out, not just for notification, but in research and preparing, and we believe that it should be on par with what appeal fees are for other bodies. What the community benefit of mature trees, a belief that the city has not done a good enough job of educating our public on why we need to preserve these trees or plant trees for future generations. One of our early concepts was the idea of an undesirable species list. And this, again, as I mentioned, that Assistant City Attorney Spansel and I, we've done a lot of research. This is very common in other communities. And one of our earlier renditions of concepts was having a species list that we maybe have known issues, pests, challenges. So if somebody an applicant came in with tree species X, we would automatically rubber stamp that approval. There wouldn't necessarily be an appeal process. That was quite alarming to some folks, understandably so, and we have certainly dialed back from that. And I'll talk about the specific language a little later. Also, that our removal criteria doesn't do enough to protect large trees. So we've included some conceptual language that we believe allows the city the authority to weigh multiple factors, including the benefits of the tree, not just a reason the tree should be removed. And then also there's this kind of phenomena that has gone on at times where we call it arborist shopping. The applicant is in charge of getting their own certified arborist report if the city is requiring it. And you can certainly, you're paying this person, this professional, and sometimes we see that the reports may be a little more weighted on the removal side as opposed to an objective report. Next slide, please. So from the council, we heard some concerns because as part of this, we do want to see more equitable replacement for our community, and that also includes an increase in fees. And in some cases, it could be a significant fee. You have a very large tree. The council had some concerns with that. What if a tree dies of natural causes? We all know coast live oaks are here in the area. You could have a beautiful 150-year-old tree in your backyard that you took care of, and it got sudden oak death, a terminal disease that is known to be here in the area, should you then be on the hook not only for removing that tree, but the loss to the community of that tree that you had no fault in its mortality? So that's something that we are working through the process. As you all know, you have these ministerial approvals that happen with development, SB 9 and ADUs. There's only so far we can go with our ordinance. We cannot prevent any state mandated rulings on development. A mechanism of city funds to assist private trees. This is utilizing public funds to help maintain private trees for the benefit of our community. That is what this tree ordinance is about. When we talk about the urban forest, we're not just talking about city-owned trees. We're talking about these mature trees that collectively together help support our community for all the benefits that trees do. One of our council members in particular shared a thought that they believe that there should be public funding available, maybe through a grant program. We have not filled out all those parameters, but in the ordinance, we want to be able to have the framework so that at a later date of council through resolution, lawful resolution, we're able to have some sort of grant program to help maintain these private trees that are there for the community benefit. There was also an interest of different criteria for trees in wildland areas. Think like Mills Canyon, Burlingame Hills, up in that area. Through our research, we really didn't find a whole lot of different sets or rulings with regard to wildland trees versus trees in more the urban environment. And moving forward thus far, we're on the mindset that we believe that our current criteria of reasons to remove trees would blend in well with a wildland reason. We wouldn't need a separate reasoning for wildland areas. And then better outreach to new property owners. I can tell you that, community development and parks has done quite a bit of outreach to our local realtor association, contractor association, trying to get more interested parties here at the table to discuss what their concerns are. I certainly get the phone calls when we're talking about these things, calling us tyrants and all sorts of stuff, but we're really doing what is very typical of other municipalities that are tree cities and value their association with trees in the community. And then also, if we're looking at a development on a property, one of the things that then Mayor Brownrigg discussed is alternative designs. If we have a significant tree in someone's yard and they want to look at reasonable development, well, do we look at maybe reasonable accommodations or adjustments? I think his specific example that he utilized at the time was, typically residences are not allowed to be over 2 stories tall. If you have a significant tree, would you allow a home to be 3 stories tall? This is not my parameter. That's your world that you're living in. But these are ideas that we need to think about when we look at the importance of a particular tree. How far are we willing to go to save this tree in order to allow reasonable development? Next slide, please. So we kind of identified this down into 5 goals. We'll start with the green ovals, because that's pretty much where we found some conceptual agreement with previous commissions and council and the public. Expanding the definition of terms to more modern arboriculture standards and what the roles of folks are. And we're going to talk a lot about what we believe the Planning Commission role should be, and we certainly want your feedback on that as well. And then for our city attorney's office, they've done a great job of researching how to increase penalties, including criminal prosecution in the most egregious of cases. We certainly don't want to go there, but we want to make sure we have that in our tool belt if we need it. The red square, that's more what we focused on with the Beautification Commission and council. I'm certainly open to input, but refining the removal process. There's a lot of reasons that applicants seek to remove a tree. And in our earlier iteration of this, we looked at categorizing criteria, and some criteria would not be appealable. We heard from our community that they were very concerned about the reduction of public input when it comes to removing trees. And we have winnowed that down in order to just limit it to emergency situations, trees that are dead or have mostly 50% of their canopy dead with no hope of recovery. And then, of course, those that are ministerial approvals would not be appealable because that would be a blockade to reasonable development. But what we do, and sorry, on the replacement requirements, that also increased as well. And we're going to go through some specific slides that show you what those increases are. Again, on par with what a lot of other communities have been doing as well. But by and large, today's public comment, I think what's going to be read or shared, a lot of it is centered around native trees. But prior to today, what we had mostly heard from our community is a great concern about the rate that trees are being removed in relation to development. You know, if you want to develop, you can. Don't worry about the tree. I think our community development staff have done a great job in the last year of increasing awareness for applicants and getting education out there in terms of the importance and how construction can affect development. Next slide, please. So let's start with definition. So you might hear the term heritage tree thrown around. A lot of other communities use that. Our communities use the term protected tree. So these are trees that require a permit. The first 3 bullet points are exactly what's in our code now. That doesn't change. So any city-owned or maintained tree, any private tree that if you measured it around its circumference at 54 inches height would be 48 inches in circumference. Or a tree that was designated a heritage tree or grove. There was a program in the early 1970s that a lot of folks were going around nominating trees, and there's been discussion about reviving it. However, these are trees that the City Council, the Beautification Commission, the Director of Parks and Recreation, or the City Arborist could nominate for heritage status. And regardless of size, it would automatically become a protected tree. What is very new is the 4th bullet point. So we have trees that we approve for removal and the trees get replaced, or we approve development and we require trees to be planted as part of that development. These trees would then become protected. What can happen now is once you get your final permit signed off, whether it's for development or a tree permit, the applicant could literally just yank it out of the ground and there's nothing we can do about that. So we want to be able to have a mechanism here that provides for these trees to be protected and maintained. The whole purpose of this is to grow the trees for the next generation, right? Reasonable development or a tree needs to be removed for a reasonable reason. We say, let's replace it for the next generation. If you just go yank it out, that defeated the purpose. This will represent additional staff time, but we have a GIS asset management system specifically for our trees. And we believe we can track our private trees that way as well. Next slide, please. Some additional definitions, and this has been the topic of discussion as well, is, well, what qualifies as a tree? We call it a landscape tree. This is our own definition. It's a single stem tree. It is not fruiting, no nuts. It has a broad canopy and will grow to be at least 15 feet tall and 10 feet wide within 20 years. So a lemon tree, apple tree, nut tree, Japanese maple, Italian cypress, those will not qualify. It doesn't mean an applicant can't have those growing on their property, but they're just not going to count as a replacement tree for the city of Burlingame. Tree protection zone is an area, this is specifically with development, of exclusion or to limit potential damage from construction activity. A tree protection plan that is provided by a project arborist. The applicant would hire to prepare plans on how the construction can occur while retaining or maintaining these trees. And then the project arborist is the certified arborist that's retained by the applicant. Next slide, please. So our goals with development is we really want to be able to clearly define trees requiring identification, the assessment of those trees, and the valuation of them. We really want to encourage the tree retention and to explore alternative design or adjustments to a project footprint. We need to establish the tree protection requirements. And this is probably the biggest focus here, is that it really becomes part of the design review. What could happen now is you all could approve a design review and then folks come in and apply for a tree removal permit because that's still required. And then it could go to get appealed, go to the the Beautification Commission. And now we have commissions that are at odds over a project. When it comes to development, non-ministerial approval development, things that are subject to design review, If a tree is going to be removed as part of that process, you all are the authoritative body. So we will need to work in-house with staff how we do our public notification, but those appeals would be coming to you. If it was to be appealed beyond the planning commission, it would go to the city council, just like any other design review. As I mentioned, shown in a later slide, increased planting requirements. And we also want to take a look at providing alternative planting opportunities. This is something that we really haven't explored very much, whether it be off-site or in lieu fees, and we'll talk about that. And then give staff the authority to stop work in situations where damage is occurring to trees during construction. Next slide, please. So again, I'm just honing in on that. Development plans requiring the planning commission review. Whenever those come through, myself or the designee would review the plans. They work with the applicant to make sure we're meeting the parameters of our ordinance with relation to trees before it goes to design review. The application is considered a request for removal permit if there are trees slated for removal. And again, these are protected size trees, so trees that are over 48 inches circumference. Anything less does not require a permit. The arborist would review the planting requirements and need for a tree protection plan. And if the planning commission approves it, noted removals are approved and become part of the project. There's still the tree permit process, but it's more of a rubber stamp. Once the planning commission approves, if it's related to a building project, we will issue the permit when the building permit is in hand. In the past, we weren't doing that, and unfortunately, some trees came down and the development never occurred. So we want to make sure that the trees are not coming down for development reasons until there's a building permit in hand. I think, Scott, you're on the next slide.
Yep. Could we go to the next slide, please? Oh, no, you're already there. So thank you very much, Rich. I think speaking a little bit about what's going to happen prior to the Planning Commission and the hearings there is really important. And that's certainly one of the big buckets that we want to talk about today. And I'm going to be talking about 3 buckets of projects that are going to be in that what we call the development or the redevelopment stages, because a lot of what City Arborist Holtz is going to be talking about today is kind of outside of what happens at the Planning Commission level and outside of the planning department in general. But these are the sorts of 3 buckets that really are impacted by planning or the Planning Commission. So the first one is really on those projects that don't have any discretionary review, but are still handled by the planning department. So these small projects, they don't need design review. They don't need any permits from the Planning Commission for that discretionary review. Nothing's really going to change from the current process. That's going to be something that someone comes in, they might want to do their project and they go to planning, but they also need to go over to the Parks Department to make sure that they get their tree removal permit. If they can't get their tree removal permit there, that's something that would go through the ordinary appeal process, where the Beautification Commission would look at it and determine whether that tree could come out to approve that project. So not much has changed in that bucket. The second bucket is going to be that which City Arborist Holtz just talked about, where someone does want to make some significant changes and something that's going to require the Planning Commission to take a look at it and to grant those permits. On those sorts of instances, just as City Arborist Holtz just said, those individuals are going to have that arborist come in. They're going to have to put those plans together. But it's going to, and this is a big change, it's going to come together in front of the Planning Commission. And if the Planning Commission makes the approval of the project, any trees that are physically impacted and that would have to be removed are now going to be essentially granted for the permitting approval. Because right now, as City Arborist Holtz says, we are living in kind of a world where 2 commissions can affect the approvals of one another. And that can be very confusing, can also be a little bit of an issue for the person trying to do it. They might have a design review permit getting ready to build their building, but then the Beautification Commission says that they won't approve their tree removal permit. So that's a little bit of an issue that we'd like to remedy by the Planning Commission looking at the project as a whole, of course, with a lot of input from our city arborist, and of course, looking at those trees together with the project. There is still appeal rights there, and as City Arborist Holtz said, any appeal of the project would go up to the City Council, but anyone who wants to appeal that tree coming out could do so by appealing the project as a whole to the City Council. And then finally, there's the third bucket, and this is the bucket that the city's been trying to do a lot of research on and trying to figure out what sort of solutions there may be, and that's where we're really impacted by the state law. As City Arborist Holtz talked about earlier, there's certain projects, and we've talked about this here at the Planning Commission a lot. SB 9, certain state mandated ministerial approval of ADUs that can't even come before the Planning Commission. And really, if they hit every box of what they're supposed to do and they check out every box of what's required by the state, the planning department has to approve that project. In those sorts of instances, our research has told us, and speaking with outside counsel on this, is that we're not going to be able to stop that development even if there is a tree there. What we can do, and what City Arborist Holtz will be talking about in later slides, is we can still try to put in the other aspects of the permit. So replacement requirements for a tree that's removed, we can do that. In lieu fees, if it can't be replanted, those updated in lieu fees, which are hopefully going to recapture the loss that the urban forest has had from this tree being removed, we're going to charge that to the person who's removed that tree. But we do not believe at this time that we are able to stop development of any of those based on the protected tree. We would have to approve the tree removal permit there. So those are the three buckets that we've been talking about a lot here. We're happy to answer questions about those. I know that's a little bit confusing. I don't know, we can do that now, but it may be easier if City Arborist Holtz continues his presentation to learn a little bit more about the tree removal requirements and the new in lieu fees, and then we can answer any questions later before taking public comment.
Okay, great. Thank you. Next slide, please. So how do we want to adjust our removal process? We want to make sure that we're public noticing for all protected tree removals. That is something that has not occurred, say, in the case of emergency situations. When something wasn't appealable, we wouldn't do public notice, but we still get the phone calls coming in. And we feel to do our due diligence, and this is something we've heard from our community, that we should do more significant outreach. Just in this last year, we've already increased for significant trees, taking a page out of community development book, and we actually put notices in front of the tree. So if you don't live in the neighborhood, you can at least walk by and know that this tree is a candidate for removal. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. We believe we should apply that to ourselves as well for trees that are 48 inches in circumference or larger. Again, these are significant street trees, city-owned trees. We've never done public noticing beyond the property itself. But we will hold ourselves that same standard, but it should be noted that there is no appeal process. This is a city-owned tree, and we're doing our best to follow the same rules. Appeal is available in all private protected tree scenarios except the ministerial approval, emergencies, death, dying, or for city trees. Non-development appeals go to the Beautification Commission, and actually that should say to a body that has been designated by the city manager. This was an earlier slide and has been adjusted from our first proposal. We want to retain the existing factors for tree removal, which include likelihood of danger, disease, proximity to structures, development, topography, number of trees existing, impact the removal would have on the neighborhood, as well as impact the removal would have on the topography. We would like to add a few more categories. We've been seeing a lot of root conflict. These are trees that are, I guess my time's up. These are trees, that were awesome when they were planted, 50 years ago. And unfortunately, they were just planted close to a structure, and we're seeing more conflict. We'd like to see some more alternative scenarios rather than just coming in and saying, hey, I have a root conflict. So we want to spell this out. I mentioned the species desirability, and we actually borrowed this conceptual language from City of Sacramento. Species desirability, susceptibility to pests and disease, and ability to host pathogenic organisms that cause damage to other trees. Think things like Dutch elm disease or a particular species that is susceptible and has a high mortality rate. And if it wasn't removed, it's getting faster, could be catastrophic to the urban forest. This is something that you've seen in the Midwest with the emerald ash borer, where you see wholesale trees being removed. It is a mechanism that has been reserved for the most extreme of situations. It is still something that we believe we should hold on to, but this is not an undesirable species list, right? This is for those unique situations where we have a known pathogen or pest that has a high mortality rate. The other one we wanted to add was the public benefit of the tree remaining. You know, as we're looking at ordinance language, there's a lot of benefits to trees, and I won't take your time with all of that. But the bottom line is we want it to be known that trees are very special to this community and important for our neighborhoods. And if we believe that even though some of these factors may exist, that the factor of the tree remaining is greater, then the tree will remain. There's always the appeal rights, and as long as it's not those other situations, and our commission and council, or in the other situation, designated hearing body can have the discussion further if they believe that the director of Parks and Rec or city arborist are incorrect in their application of that. And we do want to differentiate between commercial and residential, something that we've seen in other communities in terms of replacement requirements. Next slide, please. So again, we have seen where folks just say, hey, I'm not going to plant the tree. I'm just going to pay the fee. No big deal. It's cheaper that way. The whole goal of this is not to penalize someone. It's to get the trees replanted in our community for community development. I'm sorry, benefit. You know, our community has opted to give choice of species to the applicants, whereas other communities dictate you must plant this species. Here's your list that you have to plant. Natives, whatever it may be. And there are benefits to that, but there's also a lot of freedom that's lost with that. Our goal is to get folks to plant, and but in situations where they can't, we want those funds to be placed in the tree replacement fund. We want to see an increase in the size and quantity of trees planted. Remember, I talked about the big redwood tree in your backyard, and you can just plant the little tree afterwards and everything's said and done now, but that's not accounting for the loss of this large tree. So we want to see trees that are either larger in size when they're planting or greater quantity on the property. But not everything's black and white. And we have in the past given deference to the Director of Parks and Recreation or city arborist or to our community development staff to make adjustments for each site. No site is created equal, and we want to be able to do our best to plant the trees without penalizing folks. And that in that thought of, okay, well, if we can't plant on site, what can we do? Well, perhaps we can allow off-site planting in the neighborhood. A neighborhood is defined as 300 feet within the project. So perhaps there's another area there. It could be public land, it could be private, but there are some challenges with that. Remember what I said about the definition of a protected tree. Trees that go in replacement are required to stay. So you might think you're doing your neighbor a favor by, hey, we'll plant this tree in your backyard, but they're required to keep that tree alive and healthy for its duration. There's also an idea of in lieu fees. This is something that has been adopted by other communities. It also brings in the pay-to-play thing coming in. Again, our goal is to get the trees out there. As one of our commissioners shared at the Beautification Commission as a former architect, you know, might be motivating to just maximize the development on the property, just pay the fee into our in lieu fund. So there needs to be a little bit of deference to the Director of Parks and Recreation, Community Development, City Arborist in order to require plantings when applicable and apply in lieu fees when it's not possible to do the planting. And as I mentioned before, we've had some council members interested in utilizing some of these public funds for maintenance of private trees. And we just want to have the framework in there. We are not developing that program. That would be a council resolution. And in some cases where we think that somebody is just not going to plant the trees, or it's a significant project, we can require a deposit that they put down before they receive their final, and basically ensuring that they plant the trees if they want their deposit back. Probably larger developments and commercial applications. Next slide, please. So these are the parameters we're talking about. Let's start with the bottom table there. So 14 inches diameter, that's a trunk diameter, that's a 48-inch circumference. The present requirement for any tree is 1 24-inch box. This table has been adopted from some other locations and basically set up the opportunity where somebody could plant smaller trees, but more of them. And through the industry, it is known that the smaller the container size, the quicker it naturalizes, or generally a higher success rate. However, there's also an argument that, hey, if somebody's investing in a 48-inch box, they're going to make sure that thing really survives. It's not just some tree in the backyard. It's some tree they spent thousands and thousands of dollars on. So there's some ideas there. Obviously, why does it get bigger as the tree gets bigger? It's to account for the loss of that tree. On the commercial side, it's calculated a little bit differently. And again, as I mentioned, we looked a lot at various ordinances throughout the state. But City of Sacramento had a great one, and kudos to Assistant City Attorney Van Sale, because he did a tremendous amount of research, and we've reached out to these communities to gather more information. So DSH is the diameter standard height. I'm just going to use this for argument's sake. You have a commercial development and they remove the equivalent of 100 DSH. Say it's 10, no, that wouldn't work. 5 20-inch diameter trees. They need to replace an equal amount of that. So how do they get to that total? It could be 25 48-inch boxes, or it could be 100 15-gallon containers, if that makes sense. What happens if they can't plant that many? How can they not plant 100 trees on the site? Well, there's a fee, and it's a per inch fee. I can tell you, we haven't done our own study. It would be something we need to go through, but I believe Sacramento is presently charging $350 per inch not planted. Next slide, please. So those are more on the tree replacements. We're talking reforestation when it comes to development, right? These are present requirements, just worded slightly differently. So taking your residences, for every 1,000 square foot of habitable space, a tree is required on the property. 3,000 square foot home, 3 trees required on the property. The trees can be existing as long as they meet that landscape tree definition that we talked about earlier. It's not a fruit tree, all that kind of stuff. It's healthy, it's viable, it's going to survive. Sometimes we see it where they have enough trees on the property. Sometimes they add 1 or 2 trees, or sometimes it's a wholesale change and they're going to plant all new trees. So any of those combinations. And then, as we mentioned earlier, we could look at the in lieu fee, offsite plantings, or the modified fee schedule depending on the development size. Next slide. Mr. Spansdale.
Sure. So something that, as City Arborist Holtz has talked about, we're looking at increasing these penalties for those who aren't playing by the rules that we're setting up. And one of the big things that we've seen across a lot of the municipalities and a lot of the ordinances that we thought were most applicable to here, we saw that a lot of those cities were charging restitution for the value of the tree, and we're also thinking the replanting and maintenance costs. And what that would mean in a practical example is, if someone takes out a tree that is valued at $15,000, but they do that maybe because they thought, hey, I'm just going to have to plant 1 tree after that that's not worth that amount of money, but I need to get this big, beautiful tree out of my yard for some reason. Here, we get to recapture the value of that big, beautiful tree. And we get to say, not only do you have to pay the $1,000 fine, which we're capped at by the state of California for removing it, you're also going to have to pay the city for the loss to their urban forest, which, how do we value it? We look at their appraised value of that tree. So now you have to pay the $15,000 so we can replant that somewhere else or in your own yard, or you have to replant. You have to go out and purchase it, and City Arborist Holtz has to say, yes, that is a commensurate tree that you're putting back in. So the individual doesn't just get to chop it down and pay an in lieu fee. They have to pay for the cost of the tree itself that we've lost. So that's something that's a lot different. Those fines are then payable to the tree replacement fund. So that's something that we haven't talked quite as much about today, but we think is something that could be very helpful and very flexible. As City Arborist Holtz says, this ordinance is a little bit more of a framework and less of a policy, because we do have a great urban forest management plan. We do have a lot of great council directives and policies, but what the tree replacement fund is going to do is it's going to create a mechanism that's going to capture all these in lieu fees. It's going to capture the restitution for those who take down the trees, and it allows the Parks and Rec Department, our city arborists, and all the other great minds who love trees to find out ways to enrich our urban forest that we don't have to think about just when we're creating this ordinance. We can think about it in the future and just utilize the funds that are captured from this mechanism. And then, of course, authorizing the city attorney's office to prosecute any knowing damage to a tree as a misdemeanor if the city attorney feels that that's necessary and applicable in that instance.
Great. So a couple quick scenarios. Scenario 1, property owner removes a dead pine without a permit. we would have approved the removal of the dead tree anyway. The person just didn't know, forgot, whatever it is. We educate them and we make them apply for the permit. Why do we make them apply for the permit? Because we want them to replace the tree. That's the whole goal, is replacing. Second situation, property owner tops a 100-foot redwood down to 60 feet. So you'll have, just say, for argument's sake, 40% of the tree. Educate, apply for the permit for excessive pruning and require payment to the tree replacement fund. You know, this would be where we would work at the city attorney's office, but it would be a commensurate of that valuation of the tree. So if they lost 40% of the tree, 40% of the value of whatever that tree would be. The most egregious situation, somebody wants to remove their tree, they're denied the permit and they say, hey, forget you, city, we're going to do it anyway. Well, you knew what the rules were. You were told not to do it. You did it anyway. This is where we utilize the full extent of our penalties. Next slide. So, quick overview here. Thank you for your patience, especially to our audience members. I know you have a lot of public comment, but we need to hear some feedback from you. How do you feeling about these things? The requirements for a tree protection plan, tree protection zone, and project arborist, the consideration of alternative designs and exceptions, the appeal process, and the idea that through design review projects, you all would be the body there that's first going to be looking at these tree things, tree removal applications. Replacement requirements and your thoughts on differentiating between commercial and residential. That's something very new for us. And then the idea of in lieu fees or alternative planning locations and your thoughts on potential uses of the tree replacement fund.
And with that, we're certainly available for questions, and then we want to make sure that we do get out to the public to capture many of the public comments that we know are here in person, but we've also received quite a few emails as well.
Yeah, we can start with questions. Commissioner Camarado.
Hi, thanks for your presentation and all your hard work on this. So have we also at the city level, have we gone around and looked at some of the, so I think you know as well as I do. So we put 3 trees on some properties that we have on Paloma that we never had trees on. So on the city section of by the sidewalk. So have we gone around and looked at where some of that could be, where people have taken trees out? Because that is kind of an easy fix, right? I mean, if we can put some trees there, the public, the only reason I know is because I know I could talk to you guys, but a lot of people don't know about it. So how can we educate people and say, if you don't have a tree in one of your tree beds out front off the sidewalk, you know, we can put some trees in.
Yeah, excellent point, Commissioner Camarado. So yes, we do know where vacancies are. We actually have a list, and we've been going more so than ever before, actually requiring trees in front of some folks' homes. And I have to say, by and large, our community has embraced it, but we do have some folks who are very adamant that they not have a tree in front of their home. We do our best to educate on the importance. It is a little unrelated just because we do not count city-owned trees towards that total for development on the property. So when we talk about if you have a 3,000 square foot home and you need 3 trees, oh, I got 2 city trees in front. Those do not count. Those need to be on private property. However, your point is very well taken. It's something that our beautification commission has talked about, and we have our allies in Public Works is ready to open up some concrete spaces for us, especially in the downtown Howard Avenue area. We struggle with bandwidth, and I can tell you that it seems crazy, but people get a free tree and they will not water it. We actually have a full-time staff member for 6 months that just waters trees every day to try to keep them alive. But it is something we're very interested in, and we plan on picking up this fall. That way we can take advantage of natural rainfall.
Great, thank you. I probably have some more questions, but you guys go.
Go.
So there was a property up at Hillside Circle, and that property had a ton of trees, and they cut down a number of those trees that I think probably held up most of that ground and that water and everything else. My question to you is, how would you see that type of project? How would you see those owners getting impacted by some of these fees? because they took down a large number of trees. It's so bare now. It's across the street from Hoover. So how do we see that kind of project?
Yeah, another excellent question, Commissioner Camarado. This is actually something that we spoke about at the Beautification Commission. There was an appeal to a tree removal that I approved. It was a very reluctant approval, if I could just be honest. And it was one of those situations where I had an arborist report in front of me that was clearly an arborist shopping situation. And we're trying to correct for some of that through this process. I will say a lot of the trees that were removed on the property, the majority were not of protected size. So yes, because we can go back to 2008, I think on Google Earth, you can see over the years how it's just become barren. Through the help of our city attorney's office, we were able to reinstitute and go back and look and say, hey, you removed many protected trees, you let them die. We're not going to approve this new permit until you replant. So they did replant all the required trees that had previously died. But your point is very well taken. And I do think going forward, it would probably serve as a deterrent to remove trees because there's going to be a significant greater cost associated with it. It's not just the one, we're going to move this redwood tree and put a tree in. There's going to be.
But that project will most likely come for redevelopment. And if it comes for redevelopment, some of those trees are going to end up going away, right? I mean, so.
I guess it depends on what the development is. In this situation, this was a non-development approval. These were approved because of condition of the trees themselves, not related to
Understood.
development. So there definitely would be fees associated with that. When it comes to the development side of things, you know, that you have a great fair point. It's a large property. If they just put in a 3,000 square foot home, then they would only need to have 3 trees, right? But you have all this area you could plant. So it's a very valid point. And this is where I think you know, we're going to have to ask our council, how much authority do you want to give us to make these requirements to either increase planting requirements or decrease planting requirements in situations? And I think that's.
I have one more question and then I'll stop because I could go on, but what is the impact that we see these large redwood trees having on not only the property it's on, but surrounding properties that it's near? So are the root systems impeding on other neighbors' homes and the impact that it has and the financial impact it has for the neighbors for uplifting concrete or uplifting fences or getting into the, you know, the basement or the crawl space or the subfloor of the garages? So what are you guys seeing out there that's impacting not only the property owner itself, that on the 6,000 square foot lot, which might have a grove of redwood trees, but the surrounding houses that are around it?
You had to pick on my favorite tree. The redwood trees, they do have, you know, rather fibrous invasive root system that can travel very far. Not as disrupting as say like an oak tree where you can see these big buckling, but yes, they get into the small cracks very easily, right? Sewer lines. I think a lot of these things come down to good communication with neighbors in order to work out what the challenge is. We've seen situations where 2 homes over, so I don't know if it's a 50 by 150 lot, but say 100 feet away of a 100-foot tall tree, it's very typical. You know, there was some root intrusion there. Now, could there be alternative root pruning that far away from the tree? Absolutely. As an arborist, I would say, yeah, that's far enough away. But when that tree was planted as a little thing in the backyard and now it's impacting foundation, that's a little more challenging. We do require in those situations, not just an arborist report, but also a structural engineer's report if we're going to approve due to impacts to the foundation. What are we seeing out there? I will say redwood trees are very tolerant of root pruning. So neighbors, let's say you have a neighbor who loves their tree and the other neighbor who's impacted by the roots doesn't. Usually they just prune the roots and hopefully they have good communication. You know, you do have, we have some definitions actually. Again, I mentioned roots. We're looking at including root pruning as part of the permit process, that you're not allowed to remove more than 15% of the root structure, and you certainly cannot do anything that would be detrimental to the tree, like cause it to fall, cause it to die, those types of things. a good arborist would be able to identify what would be appropriate root pruning and measures. But it is a challenge, right? I mean, because that tree, while being very impactful to the neighbor who doesn't technically own the tree, the whole neighborhood benefits from how big this tree is. And we've heard from our community members significantly so as we've approved some of these removal for the exact reason that you've talked about, the root intrusion. So
Yeah, because we have a lot of still elderly people in our community and some of them are on fixed incomes and can't afford to do those prunings of those roots, right? But they're impacting their own property. So when they go sell their property, it's impacted by the sale of that property
Mhm.
because they may not get what they want for their home because somebody else is going to have to come in and take care of that. So I'm just trying to figure out how do we as a community help save these trees but protect the neighbors that are surrounding these.
Yeah. And I think you're thinking along the lines of our mayor, where you have these situations where perhaps the tree is very beneficial and could stay, but it is impacting whether it be the actual property or neighbor's property. Perhaps there is use of public funds available. That is really far down the road. We're just trying to get the framework here, but that is one of the concepts. And that's really forward and progressive thinking. I don't know that we're aware of any other community that does that. And there's certainly some legal parameters, but we'll kick that over to Mistress Van Sale. Thank you. Good point.
Thank you.
Also questions? Commissioner Say?
So there's a lot of discussion about fees throughout this study item report or staff report. We don't really see any quantification of the fees. And I'm wondering if there's, and there was at some point, I can't find it in here, but there was some mention of a maximum of $1,000 fee for limited by state law or whatever it may be. And so I'm just wondering how we're going to establish any.
Sure, I can take a first pass at that and then City Arborist Holtz can add anything there. So the fine maximum is $1,000 and that's defined by California law. So any amount that's fined to an individual is going to be capped at $1,000, not including potentially what we talked about, the restitution of the tree. So that's saying we've lost this and we are going after this individual for that amount of money for the loss to the community. But if we're just saying like a police officer gives a traffic ticket, there is a maximum amount on that. California has capped that as $1,000. So the actual amount for harming or removing a tree that we could actually charge just for that act would be $1,000. And that's also the cap for a misdemeanor. In terms of fees are a little bit different. We can't give an exact quantification of it. And I'm probably going to turn back to City Arborist Holtz to see if he can remember what Sacramento currently uses. But that's because we would have to do a fee study to determine exactly what the loss is to the community. And that's what we would charge that individual for the loss of the tree. So for example, I think City Arborist Holtz was talking about what is the quantification of a 1-inch DSH replacement for an in lieu fee. In the city of Sacramento, it may just be slightly different than the city of Burlingame. And we'd have to do a study on that before we're allowed to charge that fee. So we would go through it, but it would probably be pretty similar to what we're seeing being charged. So I'm going to turn it back to City Arborist Holtz if he has any examples there. He's smiling.
I've been warned by the city attorney's office not to specify any fees because we do need to do a fee study. However, I can tell you what fees exist. So presently, if somebody doesn't plant a tree here in Burlingame, it's a $1,500 fee. A lot of people are just like, yeah, no problem, write the check, and that's it. Other places look at what the valuation of the tree that's being removed would be. I mentioned with Sacramento, if you're looking at the DSH, the per inch that needs to be replaced, that's $350 per inch. I've also seen formulas in other places that are proration or combination of the sort. So we do not have a specific proposal of what those fees would be. We really need to delve into that. So the ordinance, again, is to get the framework in that whatever fees would be, that they would go into this fund and be able to be utilized for our urban forest, and then if council decides later for other purposes.
Okay, thank you. I don't know how, so going back to the 3,000 square foot house requires three trees. We see very often here in the Planning Commission, applicants who come before us and there may be 12 trees on a property. and they knock out all of them and then build a new house and then plant 3 new trees. Is there any way that we can have a kind of a tree for a tree kind of requirement for if you remove a tree, you plant a tree, especially if it's certain species? I can understand maybe fruit trees or nut trees may not count towards those, but any substantive tree or size or species that we go beyond the 1 tree per 1,000 square foot of house?
Excellent point. We can do anything, all right? Right, Scott? Anything that's legal. You bring up a good point, and we can certainly use that as input. I think the thing to remember is our community has largely looked at trees that are just the 48-inch protected size, right? Circumference. So anything that's smaller, if it's 46 inches, it can be removed and there's no consequence to that. That's not covered in our ordinance. If we want to look at different definitions, whether it be overall, I can tell you Palo Alto looks at, and I believe Menlo Park as well, they have oaks at a smaller size. Instead of 48, it's maybe 34. Each species has its designation. We looked at that, and the reason that I, as a staff member, would recommend against that is because our typical property owner doesn't know. They don't know exactly what species is there. I can tell you, I see application, oh, it's pine tree, and it's totally not that all the time. And I would hate to get someone on the cusp because they were off an inch or something like that. That's why we stuck with 1 solid size. But it is certainly something we can entertain, whether it's species specific, whether it's development specific. You brought up a point. We see a lot of these plantings now where we see 12 trees planted in a row. That's not really meant to be what a tree is supposed to be. We want the broad canopy, not a tree that's just going to be a hedgerow for privacy. That doesn't count. So we do, when we're going through the development process in the planning phase, myself or the contract arborist working for community development will reach out and say, hey, these do not qualify because we know these aren't going to grow to their full form. Just like a tree in a container, and this may be something that comes before you someday where we're seeing these rooftop gardens. Does a tree in a container count? Is it a partial credit? So these are questions that have come up to us just in this last year, and we're kind of wrestling with, well, how do we address it? But I think that's a fair point, and I'm taking your feedback here as, you'd like to see that if you have a property, and I'll go back to Ms. Camarado's comment about the hillside property there that had tons of trees, but a lot of them weren't protected. We should have a way to capture for that. And I don't know if the mechanism is there in our current ordinance. I wouldn't believe so, but with some of the things that concepts that we are considering here, perhaps that could be captured as well.
I have a 3rd question. So speaking of the larger mature 48-inch diameter trees or circumference trees, so I wonder if we could have sort of like how we have design consultants that aid us sometimes or aiding applicants actually with their projects. If a property has a tree or trees of that size, that there would be an arborist that could be added to the team to kind of pre-consider how to design a structure on the property before it comes to us and, they establish that all trees need to be removed on a property. And I just wonder creatively if there's a way that we could, just kind of prepare for it, have some foresight on how to accommodate the trees on a property. I think there was some discussion about even addressing setback variances and stuff like that to allow for the maintenance of these trees.
It sounded like this occurs before it gets to the planning commission
Yeah,
level.
I
I don't know. I mean, obviously I'm the city arborist. I provide input on some projects, but there is a contract employee that provides a significant amount of input for our planners. Whether that is a person that would be qualified, I'd probably leave it to Mr. Huron, his designation, or if he feels like there would need to be someone else that would need to weigh in on that.
The contract person that's helping us review plans now through planning commission review and also for building permits is very thorough. I think they could certainly review a proposed plan when it comes through for design review and provide a recommendation. Of course, she would have to review an arborist report that's submitted along for tree removals and that sort of thing. But I mean, we can look further into that to see if she can provide additional input and guidance for planning commission review of the project.
Yeah, or maybe even just as a public service, if someone's coming to the planning department and say, oh, I want to build on this property, but I've got this huge tree right in the middle of my lot. What do I do? Just almost as a service to help provide some, oh, have you thought about maybe you can design it this way, or, or like the 3-story building let's talk about. Just some, just other means to protect the tree. I mean, these are really valuable trees, and if there's any way that we could just help it earlier than too late, not too late, but where it comes to us and all the proposals, designs done, renderings are done, and all the trees have already been proposed to be removed, but just on the early end.
Yeah, and that's certainly a good idea. One of the issues is by the time projects get submitted, come to us, they're already kind of designed. So I think it's just a matter of getting the word out.
Right, that's what I mean, like
That might be
early on.
something that's offered by the city.
Right.
And I see Commissioner Camarado has a question, but I do want to remind we are still in the questions phase. So we do want to make sure our members of the public can have a chance to speak too before we start doing any.
I'm sorry, I have one more question. On Commissioner Say's point, can we come up with a plan like we do with design review of homes? We have characters of homes and what they should look like. Can we come up with a plan of where people can plant the 3 trees if they're building a brand new house? So here's your lot, 6,000 square feet, typical lot size. You can plant these 3 trees, and these are the locations where we would suggest you can kind of move them around, but maybe give a layout, right? Do a layout of where trees can go.
So I think in the last year, we've seen a lot of improvements to the process and really raising the bar when it comes to trees. The contract arborist that community development has engaged with is very thorough, and she does a great job early on. And I know our planning staff would welcome a process. Once we get this framework down, that's kind of the next step, is working internally. How can we solve some of these issues that come to us? How can we educate the public? That's really where we need to go. And whether it's contractors or real estate agents, I can tell you we put things in the e-news all the time. I don't know if anyone reads those, but we do our best to reach out where we can. And we will certainly engage with further, because we've heard that from our community members. We need to do more outreach, and we will certainly continue to do so.
Commissioner Pfaff?
Thank you. I actually had almost exactly the same question as Commissioner Say regarding a guide. Mine was more like catch them up front. Probably they realize that they have a significant tree or trees on their lot, and steering them, just starting off as a different design. I'm not saying a 3-story design. I'm saying starting off as a completely different design that maybe highlights the tree rather than fighting against it. Well, I'll read it later when we have comments. I found something I really liked about site planning from, I guess it was Pasadena. So on the question phase, I wanted to know, first of all, did we ever look into, and it's really a realtor issue, I guess, but I don't know enough about it. Maybe my colleague does. If there's such thing as a deed restriction, deed like disclosure, when a property changes hands, people usually know they've got a big tree on there, usually, or a special tree. Is there some mechanism that any cities have done that can, well, sort of memorialize that there is a tree on this parcel? You are buying this parcel with the understanding that it's possible you're going to have trouble getting this tree removed. So it's out there. Like, I live next to the train tracks. It's possible you're going to hear train noise, or under the helicopter line or train, airport. You know, there are things I remember them when long time ago, when we got our house, that they're in there. Is it possible to have something in there? I don't know if it's a realtor board or whatever. We talked about it many years ago at council level, but it was delayed until we actually had this conversation. So I'm bringing it up as remember this conversation, to look into whether that is something that exists. So you're going to answer it now, or do I continue?
I was going to say it's certainly something we can look into,
Okay.
but I don't think we've done the research on that at this point. Deed restrictions are pretty severe, so that would be something that I don't think would be
I'm not
possible.
the right language.
But like a notification system, and I know City Arborist Holtz has talked about, we do have certain software now where you can essentially input like GIS data about where a tree is and the size of the tree. So there may be some things that we're able to explore there, but I did want to let you know we haven't looked into that specific issue
Okay.
as of yet.
That was the one thing, because I do want to acknowledge the comments that came in, because they reminded me of letters and such that have come in, because they reminded me of things that have been talked about long ago that I didn't know the answer to. Also, you mentioned just briefly a non-biased arborist involving them. And so is that something that how maybe you can explain,
What it is,
What-
or can we do it?
would that work?
So again, this is the framework. We just want to make sure we can do it. It wouldn't say in our ordinance, and you're going to hire an
Oh.
independent arborist retained by the city. We just want to make sure we have the mechanism, and through our own policy or the urban forest management program or resolution, we can do these other things. The idea of that is basically the city could do a number of things. We could have an established list that said you have to select from this list. These are the city-approved arborists that you can go from. Menlo Park does that. Or we could do an RFP, something similar to what I believe the community development does, is where we have one on retainer or a few on retainer, and they rotate around. And, you just pay the fee to the city, and the city is the one who's actually employing the independent arborist.
Okay, great. And then see, we're on the question phase still. You did talk about strong statements, campaign to protection of heritage tree and their value. And design guidelines. Oh yeah, have we thought about, see, this is the thing, I feel like there's these different boxes, and if you're considering handing over a lot of decision-making to us, which is going to be done hopefully in the earlier phase rather than later, because we get them when they're pretty baked a lot of the time. I was wondering, has there been a thought to giving direction as far as deciduous and evergreen mixes? Because I'm mentioning this only because we get a lot of light pollution generally now, a lot of windows, it's just a real problem. And I don't know that people think in advance, oh, this is a lot of light pollution and I'm putting a deciduous tree here. So a large part of the year, then there's just light all over the place. So is there thought, I'm sorry, I forgot the name of the helper and the staff who helps with the landscaping. Eileen?
Ellen?
Ellen.
Oh, yeah.
I'll get it with
Nice.
me. Ellen, is that something that you currently look at, or is that what we would need to look at on our end? I feel like we need it would be really good if we had some solid stuff so we're not all over the map.
I think that's an excellent point, Commissioner Pfaff. That is not something I'm aware of, and I can research with other communities. Typically, when you see trees being put in terms of helping with energy savings, you see the deciduous tree, shade in the summer, then the sunlight comes through in the wintertime for our Northern Hemisphere residences. Your point about light pollution is well taken. We do not plant as many evergreens as we do deciduous trees. So it can look pretty naked on some of these streets in the wintertime. But great point, and something we can research further.
Okay, and great. And then you mentioned that you possibly have the ability to track trees with is it GIS or GPS?
I say GIS, but I'm not an
Yeah.
expert with it.
El Camino was done that way, and that's why I'm asking, how accurate is it? I'm just wondering, can you really, if someone, for example, someone's planting, there are 3 trees that they're planting are deciduous,
Mhm.
even show. So how would you see if someone had removed those, or the neighbors to be tattling on each other, which that probably is not going to be very,
So we do not have bandwidth to go and inspect. It is complaint based, just like code enforcement. The entry would happen once the plans are approved, either at the development side or whether the permit's approved on the removal side. We would require a replanting plan rather than, hey, you can plant anywhere on your property. Okay, before we approve the permit, we want to see where are you going to put the tree? What species is it going to be? And then we would put it into our system and verify at the permit final. And if we need to adjust it at that point, we can adjust it then.
that's right. So I get that part, but you said they were also protected.
Mhm.
So later, let's say in 5 years, and this has happened all over my neighborhood, the tree's just gone. They were trees that were part of the requirement. And I thought you were saying that they were now protected with this
Yes.
the new framework,
Mhm.
which is great. I just don't know, again, your bandwidth. How would that actually, you're saying complaint based, someone would have to say, I know there were 3 trees back there in their backyard
Mhm.
and they've taken them out. So
So-
logistically, how do you imagine that?
So the ordinance would give us the mechanism to do enforcement with that, to say, hey, we have this here. You're supposed to have this tree. The tree isn't there. Are you going to replant the tree or are you going to pay a fine? How is this going to go? It still needs to be massaged out. I can tell you this is my brainchild and it's been very difficult for our city attorney's office to make this work. There's some specific language, and Assistant City Attorney Spansale says to me, well, what happens if the tree just dies on its own? It's like, well, you need to keep it alive, water the tree. It needs to be massaged out, but these are concepts, right? The alternative is we stay with what we're at now and people can just yank them out anyway. At least this gives us some sort of enforcement mechanism.
Yeah, I mean, I'm on your team,
Yeah.
I mean, it's never worked to say someone took something out before, so you're just saying it's the same, except now you have the tools to make them replace or pay for it, is what you're saying this framework would be.
Mhm.
Okay, that's,
Did you?
I think too, and correct me if I'm wrong, City Results, but I think before they could have removed those, there was nothing wrong. Those trees could come out. There was no permit required because they weren't of the protected
Mhm.
size. Now, since they've been deemed protected, even though they're not of that size yet, there is a penalty to it. So they are going
Got
to
it.
either replant or they're going to have to pay the in lieu fee.
that's
Correct me if
the
Yeah.
difference. That's the big, that's.
Yes, that's the difference.
That-
Now they're protected, or they could take them out, and that's kind of what City Arborist Holtz talked about earlier. You plant them to get your approval at this level, but then you go and a couple of years later, you can remove them, and since they were so small,
They didn't count.
they didn't count.
They didn't count. Okay, and then the other is, yeah, you mentioned having a larger radius. What are you imagining? Because a couple of comments came in. So now it's 100 feet. Do you have something in mind for you besides just the sandwich board?
300 feet, the
300.
the definition of neighborhood.
Very good. Okay, and finally, but I don't, it's probably going into more of a planning zoning issue, but we do have something that I'm wondering about is I think there are zones where we have, well, I think R3 and R4 have no landscape requirement. I checked this afternoon. There's no landscape requirement. So I feel like even though that's maybe something that is beyond what you're talking about right now, I feel like there's going to be multi-prong approach to this if we're going to be more involved. And obviously we're just advisory, but it's council, then to tweak some of these things like some of the maximum parcel footprint size, the amount of landscape, if any, that goes around there, and how turf pavers and such. I mean, there's some things that, well, I'll make it in public comment. I'll say, I think they need to be looked at and cleaned up on the planning level. and maybe it's just staff level or study session, something which can really help bolster, because yours is going to be limited to what you can do. But I feel like there's a lot of cleanup on our end or on the planning side and without giving Ruben a bunch of work. And it might be simple stuff, but it's just the parts aren't kind of kicking in because we got all the state stuff on top of it. There's just not a lot of plantable area left at the end of the day. I think that's the bottom line, is there's just a lot of structures and the plantable area is kind of disappearing. So
And as you mentioned, I think that's probably going to be something that's a little more of a zoning code issue.
yes,
Like right now, we're talking about Title 12 and the.
I know.
So, no,
Want to
you're
put
completely,
bug in the ear.
but those are something that we could have a study session at a future date on as well.
Of
It's not something that City Arbors Holtz would be able to
Right.
take care of in the actual.
Got it. No, of course. I think that those were my questions. Thank you.
Any other questions? Commissioner Schmidt?
Do we have any language that talks about trees that are actually too big for the lots that we have? Some of these oak trees, their canopies cover 2 lots.
So, I mean, too big is a relative term, right? And open to interpretation. Can the tree be trimmed in order to, be less likely to be a danger, failure, those types of things? We do not have language specifically about being too big, but in the current ordinance, it does have language about taking into effect the growing space, the general area that's around. A lot of times that is related to utilities, like overhead utilities. I guess it could be proximity to a structure as well, could be interpreted that way. But in terms of specific language about being too big, no. It's more about conflict with what it says. Specifically, it says, likelihood and consequences of failure and impact, proximity to existing or proposed structures, yards, driveways, or other trees, infrastructure and growing constraints, utility improvement conflicts, species desirability, and age of the relative tree to the average urban lifespan of the typical of the species.
Okay.
I don't know if you would interpret that to encompass your question. I would, but
Well,
if you feel like something should be
a
called
lot of
out.
these redwood trees are huge
Mhm.
and they have huge impacts on a lot of people besides the person who owns the tree.
Mhm.
The oak trees actually, I think, are worse in that they can cover 3-4 lots, especially if it's planted in the last foot of the lot. It's going to span over the easement and into somebody else's yard and the 2 side yards. And there's not a lot that can be done about that. And then when they're of protected size, then you're threatened with legal action.
So, and I'm not a lawyer, but under the California law or code, a neighbor can cut up to 20% of the tree that's encroaching upon their property, so long as it doesn't cause a tree to fail or anything like that. So there are some things that can occur if you had a neighbor's tree growing on your property. We're trying to capture the root portion because we feel like that's something that's been vacant. I think your point is well taken. I do think, if you drive through our neighbors to the south or our neighbors to the north, Millbrae, San Mateo, not to pick on anyone if they're here from those communities, but it's visually different. The city has had a very special relationship with trees. In 1908, we were incorporated in June. By September, we had our first tree ordinance protecting trees. It's pretty profound back then. Our community has long been centered around trees, but your points are well taken that these trees were planted in someone's backyard. They've got a free tree and it was great. And now it's pretty impactful. And it's difficult for me as a city arborist to make decisions to support those trees when I don't see anything really with the health of the tree, anything wrong with it, right? Other than these growing constraints, and try to engage property owners in having conversation. Are there other mitigation options other than removal? And in some cases, not. I have reluctantly approve because I believe they meet our criteria that we've listed here.
I just think that for me, love the trees on El Camino, but I think we've let them go way too long and now they're destroying El Camino. And if we had maybe had a proactive approach 20 or 30 years ago, before they got bigger and bigger, we maybe would have been able to proactively manage that and reduce the damage. Some of these trees that are in the neighborhoods, same thing. They don't actually get managed.
Yeah, so I mean, going forward, I think arboriculture is becoming much more in the forefront. I can tell you on the city side, we're making sustainable decisions that aren't going to saddle future generations with some of the challenging decisions that we've had to make. You know, we're a largely built out community, right? These things were planted before we had sidewalks and asphalt and overhead utilities. You know, we're doing our best to retain them for the benefits that they provide our community, but also manage what the potential risk and liability could be. You know, on the private side, that is very challenging. I mean, you all have brought up a lot of points about, you know, the private owner who can't manage the tree, or the tree that's affecting neighbor 2 houses down, and, you know, what say do they have in the matter? Those are challenging decisions, and these are things that we are bringing to the council, and they are wrestling with, right? Just like I used the example about the tree that died of natural causes. Why are we going to saddle that person with, you know, the cost of that when they did their best? So, I mean, point well taken. I will say that, you know, in the research that we've done, I have not seen in any other ordinance something about a tree being too tall or too big specifically. It's more generalized as in the statement that I read to you. One of factors to consider, benefits of the tree versus the challenges associated with it.
But I do think a proactive management strategy needs to include something in this area too, because as we become more solar oriented and we have small lots, there's just only so much space and that we can deal with. And some of these trees wipe out the sun.
Yeah, the California Solar Shade Act, I was pretty clear on that. It's basically what came first, chicken or the egg. If the tree was there first, then the tree wins. If the solar's there first and the tree grows up, then the tree needs to be trimmed. But if our city takes a different stance, that's, you know, that's upon us.
Okay, thank you.
I had one question. I was wondering if there's any consideration as it relates to homeowners insurance and the ordinance. I had a friend who recently bought a house, actually, I think from Sandy, who couldn't get their home insured because of the trees that were in their yard. So they had 2 options: go with the fair housing, which is 10x what a private insurance, or chop the trees down.
It's really unfortunate what's happened in our insurance industry in California. I am one of those people who's on the California Fair Plan, so I know very well how much more expensive it is just because I choose to have a tree on my property. That has not been a consideration when we're looking at the ordinance here. But again, I think that's a great point to bring up. You know, how do we move forward with that, with the valuation of our trees? Does that become a factor, right? Somebody's rejection from their insurance company because of how the tree is. Is it because of the location of the tree? Is it because the tree hasn't been maintained? There's a lot of factors there, but that's a fair point. And I have heard that before from some of our residents.
Sure. Okay, well, if we have no other questions from the commission, do we want to open it up to public comment? I do have 2 speaker cards. I'm not sure which one was first, so we'll just start with this one. Michael Reed. Hello?
Well, you must be clairvoyant, touched on just everything I was thinking about saying, so. I love trees. However, the idea of an urban forest is kind of an oxymoron when you get a 100-foot tree that's robbing the sun and it's on the south side of your lot. Our recent occurrence this spring was that there were codominant stems from a previous bad trimming job. One of them broke out, went through our garage roof. We had to have that removed. Also broke off some branches of the oak tree that's nearby, which had to be trimmed out somewhat. So this is getting to be sort of a problem. We want to know how far we can go with this trimming business, which I think you gave us some information on. And the other thing is that the insurance companies now, with this overhanging, they're doing aerial inspections of roofs. And if they see a limb that's hanging over, they have a threat of non-renewal of the policy. That's probably going to be a situation for us next year, because there still is a very large limb that's hanging out over the top of our garage. And you know, not sure what all we can do about it, but all of the insurance companies that I have contacted, Farmers, State Farm, Allstate, Nationwide, Safeco, Liberty Mutual, all do inspections with aerial, and the Travelers has already said that we're pulling out at 94010, which is Hillsborough and Burlington. Okay, so they're kind of using any excuse to eliminate coverage because of the way things are in the insurance industry now. They've been pretty exposed the last few years with fires and floods. So a couple of things that happened too, the increasing windstorms caused a tree in Hillsborough, which is a Hillsborough Oak Street tree that went down, took out our line on Walnut Avenue, and for 3 days we were without power. Okay, so when they get big like this, yeah, you know, big enough to take out a power line, you're at the mercy of the tree and Mother Nature. The other thing that we have a recent experience when our neighbor went through the roof. I told you about that. And the neighbor has no liability with his 70. He has 3 of these trees, which have all been topped, which make them all have codominant stems, which are weak structural places on the tree. So one of them we got through our roof. When the insurance company sees this, this is going to be a problem with our future insurance, I think. Because our insurance company pays for it, not the owner of the trees. He has no liability there. So they're scrutinizing their risk to provide future coverage. This is essentially looking like a very costly, 3 minutes, okay. Stop, is that 3 minutes? Oh, we're almost there. All right, next.
Thank you very much for your comments. Next up is Jennifer Durkin.
All right, hit the timer. Well, yeah, I'm Jennifer Durkin. I'm a resident actually of San Carlos, so thank you for letting me sit in on this conversation tonight. I represent the local California Native Plant Society and also the native plant resource teams that are more regional than just our local area. And I just want to say, first off, Arborist Holtz made some really great points tonight. I love the in-depth coverage that we have of these issues. And I'm looking at things a little bit more holistically in terms of the selection of the trees themselves. Just that as we think progressively about changing some of the policies and the ways we've done things in the past, we give consideration to the environmental factors of the trees that we plant. So but California is a biodiversity hotspot with over 8,000 native plants. Many are not found anywhere else in the world, and many are going extinct. And these plants actually co-evolved with our local insects, our local, bees, butterflies, birds, and so they're interdependent on each other. And as we plant invasive trees and trees from other places, we basically rob them of food sources, and as a result, their populations are declining rather rapidly, many toward extinction. So, due to development, I mentioned the paving of our region, the imported plants, many of these creatures are starving, but we have an opportunity to bring these back. And so one way that we do that, in a recent study, Doug Tallamy, an entomologist from the University of Delaware, author of Nature's Best Hope, said that by planting 70% natives in our home gardens and in our other public areas, we can bring back many of these species. And many of these plants, these native plants that developed here, are also drought resilient. It's the way that they have grown over the years. And they're lower maintenance. They tend to not disrupt sidewalks. I think there is an exception with the redwoods that are very disruptive and belong, I think, up in the mountains or in wild places. But anyway, the California native trees are generally more disease resistant, water conserving, fire resistant. And there are many selections such as oaks, mahoganies, native cherries that make wonderful either street trees or urban trees. And once they're established after a few years, require little or no water or maintenance. Anyway, above all, they're the only ones that can bring back our native threatened species. So I recommend the Planning Commission and the City of Burlingame consider establishing some minimum standards for these native trees, include them in your plans. And I've emailed as well a list of street trees that are recommended regionally by arborists who have worked on these particular areas and can serve as a useful guide. So thank you so much. Wow, that was 500 words, and I think I'm 29 seconds under. Anyway, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak on behalf of native plants and creatures, and good luck with the rest of your work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Oh, okay, this is the same one. Any other public comments?
Yeah.
Sure.
Part two. We're seniors, we're retired. I liked your comment about your neighbors also. When we were dealing with extra costs of a tree, when we moved in, it was really tiny and now it's like 90 inches round. And it's lifting up our concrete. It is impacting the garage. And if we look at all of the fees that we would have to pay, not including the costs of the tree removal, it's really a lot. So when you're putting together whatever policy you decide, I'm hoping you consider those factors too.
Thank you very much. So now we do just general comment.
Yes, we do have several public comment emails that I'll read into the record. And in the meantime, if anyone else from the public wishes to speak, they can come up after me. So the first is from Denise Louie. I strongly urge you to update your tree policies and ordinances with the considerations below in mind. Invasive trees and other plants should be avoided for planting. Property owners should be allowed to remove invasive species. The California Invasive Plant Council identifies plants that are invasive in California, including eucalyptus. Wildfires are occurring around the world in unexpected places due to climate change. Look to the future and take action to mitigate wildfire risk. Berkeley, for example, characterizes their current wildfire risk as imminent and catastrophic. Tall, unirrigated eucalyptus are arguably the most dangerous trees. Their leaves and peeling bark are large enough to remain burning when they land after flying on the winds for miles. CAL FIRE, Fire Safe Landscape Guidelines for Defensible Space have recently been updated to say that a 5-foot perimeter around a building should be cement or gravel. Within the 100-foot parameter, smart vegetation choices would preclude tall trees that threaten the building, including particularly flammable choices like eucalyptus. Mitigating fire risk mitigates the city's liability risk for failure to keep people safe from known harms. Keep pace with insurers. Across the state, insurers are withdrawing from homeowner insurance market due to fire risk. State Farm has stopped renewing and writing policies, even in parts of San Francisco, which has not experienced a wildfire and which has no very high wildfire hazard severity zones per CAL FIRE. Take action to mitigate fire risk, even with heritage trees. The next is from Anita Pereira. I'm submitting a public comment to ask, please, that Burlingham's vegetation plan include native plants and trees. Native plants are critical to maintaining biodiversity in our world. Insects can reproduce only on plants that they have evolved with. If we plant native plants, we can get insects to reproduce. If we do not plant natives, we don't allow insects to produce and thereby contribute to their extinction, as well as to the extinction of all other species that depend on insects for food, our precious songbirds, for instance. It also affects all the other species that are further along the food chain. We are facing the great insect apocalypse occurring now. The insect apocalypse is here. This is a New York Times article. It is a very preventable tragedy. Burlingame can help alleviate this travesty by planning to support life on Earth rather than helping destroy it. Please use your power to do good. Please plant natives. Humans need insects to pollinate food crops. Also, as you know, life on Earth is a complex web. Affect one part of the web and it unravels the rest of our web. Our beloved Earth is also facing the 6th great mass extinction. It is human caused. Planting natives will also help teach citizens to help our pollinators and other species that depend on them survive extinction. Please do the right thing and help solve problems in our world rather than contributing to them. Please do everything in your esteemed power to plant plants that belong in our ecosystem rather than planting exotic plants that only serve to destroy our life-supporting ecosystems. The next is from Jean Struthers. I understand that the city of Burlingame is undergoing a tree planting program. It is important to the entire environment that native plants, including trees, be incorporated for biodiversity. The birds and insects depend on natives for sustenance. Please update that ordinance to require native trees and plants in the street tree plant list. Thank you. All right, the next is from Alvin Begun. I am not able to attend the meeting tonight in person, so I'm submitting these comments by email. They are actually the comments submitted to you by Mr. Brian Ben on May 19th. That letter is included as an attachment to the staff report. They echo my thoughts and feelings exactly, so I'm including them verbatim from his email to you, which he shared with me. Okay, the next is from Bob Hall, who's the conservation chair of the California Native Plant Society Yerba Buena chapter. I'm writing on behalf of the Yerba Buena chapter of the California Native Plant Society. We have over 600 members in San Francisco and northern San Mateo County and are committed to protecting and expanding biodiversity even in high degraded urbanized areas. Our organization urges you to add a robust selection of local and California native plants to your tree list. Here is a list of suggested native street trees for inclusion, and he provides a link. You may have read the San Francisco Chronicle article titled "The Bay Area's Natural Habitats Have Vanished." We are a microcosm of a global die-off. Or perhaps you watched the January 1st, 2023 60-minute segment called Earth's Wildfire Running Out of Places to Live. The message is dire. Human activity is driving plant and animal species to extinction at a rate not seen since the dinosaurs vanished 65 million years ago. However, the city of Burlingame can make some simple, no added cost additions to the tree list that could have a big impact. Why native? The term does have meaning. It means that the plant has been part of an intricate and complex web of animals, plants, pathogens, fungi, bacteria, and microorganisms for a very long time, one in which the rules of coexistence have been thoroughly worked out. Such communities are stable, orderly, and diverse. Introduce a novel organism and you may be asking for problems. The natural controls in its native ecosystem do not exist in this new place. The critters that depend on the indigenous plants are unable to handle the chemical defenses of the new plant and leave it alone. The plant has no predators, nothing sucking its energy and passing that energy up the food chain as native organisms do. The energy the new plant captures from the sun goes instead into proliferation, overwhelming indigenous plants and destabilizing the system. It is not just a matter of aesthetic preference. While the time for action is now, nature is resilient, notes the San Francisco Chronicle article above. And if given an opportunity, it can bounce back. The good news is you can directly make a difference. And the last, I do have one other public comment. This is from Kathy Kramer, Bringing Back the Natives Garden Tour Coordinator. I am writing on behalf of the Bringing Back the Natives Garden Tour to encourage the commissioners to include primarily native trees and shrubs on its street tree list. The more than 20,000 people in our tours database know about the importance of native trees and shrubs to wildlife and also to people, as living in more natural areas is conducive to better mental and physical health. But nature doesn't have to be a place that we go to like a park. If native plants are included in our urban areas, nature can exist outside our front doors. I hope you will read this brief, charming New York Times op-ed piece by Doug Tallamy, The Chickadee's Guide to Gardening. It explains why non-native plants provide little to no ecological plant value to our local wildlife. What it doesn't say is that almost all birds, 96% of them, must have caterpillars to feed their young. Baby birds do not eat berries or seeds or sugar water. Chicks must have large, protein-filled caterpillars. If birds don't have caterpillars, we won't have baby birds. In order to have caterpillars, we have to provide the plants that butterflies and moths can lay their eggs on, and those are California native trees and shrubs. You can see the relative value of native versus non-native plants here. It's a link to an article, I think. Look at the green bars to see the commonly available native plants that are of high ecological value, and compare that to the red bars showing the ecological value of acacia, cotton, Easter, eucalyptus, trees of heaven, tea trees, crepe myrtles, and ginkgo. Doug Tallamy's research shows that birds need 70% or more native plants by biomass in order to have enough food to give their chicks. University of Delaware and Smithsonian researchers found that to promote sustainable food webs and support wildlife, urban planners and private landowners must prioritize native plant species. Because if the yard has more than 70% native plants biomass, chickadees have a chance to reproduce and sustain their local population. As soon as the number of native drops under 70%, that probability of sustaining the species plummets to zero. The importance of including native plants in urban areas cannot be overstated, as 30% of all breeding birds have disappeared in the last 50 years. This trajectory must be changed if we, as a species, are to continue living happily on this earth. The Bringing Back the Natives Garden Tour urges you to add a robust selection of local and California native plants to your tree list. There's also a link to a list of suggested native tree species developed by an arborist for inclusion on your list. The city has the opportunity to make the world a better place for its residents merely by making better choices in the species of trees it plants in parks, on other city-owned properties such as front of city offices and libraries. I'm almost done. In medians and along streets. I hope you make the best decision for your children, for mine, and for their as yet unborn children. And let's see, I've got one more that came in. I'm writing, this is from Tracy Faria. I'm writing to urge you to update the ordinance to plant native trees and shrubs. We have long abused the environment by planting non-native trees and plants that are ecological deserts, not providing habitat for our wildlife, resulting in drastic declines in our butterfly and bird populations. We have to put a stop to this behavior now in order to save our planet and for our grandchildren to know the sweet sound of birds singing and the gentle flutter of butterflies. The old ornamental trees of the past should be in the past, and our future trees should be planted with regard to our region, regenerating a viable habitat for the future of our citizens. I implore you to take action to make substantial change. Thank you for your patience as I read through those.
Thank you, Ruben. So then, are there any other public comments? Okay. Any comments from the commission?
Yeah, I'll go. So I have to say, I don't know if we're supposed to address comments that came in. I don't think that the people who commented, a lot of them actually maybe have looked at what we actually plant. We do encourage native plants. We don't, we're not draconian. We don't make people plant native, and it's a nice mix. And if you look at pretty much every city, we're similar to every city. It's because the natives in the urban environment, they do have their limits as well. And, you know, bushes and stuff is maybe different, but the trees, it's interesting tonight, we're talking about redwoods and oaks, and they do have their limitations here as well. So I urge the people who sent in comments from the Native Plant Society to actually read our ordinance, because our city parks department and arborist has worked really hard, particularly recently, to beef up our trees, stick a few natives in there when it works. They don't always work. And so I just wanted to defend our the work we've done so far that actually has very little to do with this right here. Thank everybody for their remark, but that is, it is better than what was implied in those in the comments. Also, as far as the report that's been worked on in the draft, I actually also want to say, I think you've really done a stellar job of trying to capture what has been, well, it's a long process, but what has been suggested, what is trying to balance things out, people feeling unsafe, how to work with sizes that are difficult on lots. Love the idea of an independent arborist, so things feel more fair. I definitely feel that we could really use upfront a guidance for landscaping. And then maybe there would be ideas as far as bushes and things, small things that do grow maybe okay, the natives where they can also, they're not the trees, but we tend to look at just the trees, but I understand the wish for more bush style plants and hedges where insects and birds, all kinds of birds live. So that would be really important as well, not just to think of the trees. I'm very disturbed about, I'm going to just call it stripping of entire hillsides of all kinds of trees and bushes, native, non-native, everything that house a lot of animals and insects. And then the replacements are just limited to trees. That's very serious. I think we need to be looking much more at all levels, all tiers, trees and bushes down to ground cover, everything where creatures can hide and that keep the hillside intact or keep it from falling in, which is an issue. I just wanted to read something that I read, I think from Pasadena, kind of a guiding principle. And it says, landscaping shall be planned as an integral part of their overall project design and not simply be located in excess space after parking areas and structures have been planned. And I think, to me, that says it all. It's sort of like, it's not an extra. I feel that we can do much more to make it part of the plan than we have done before, kind of working together rather than just getting things in a sequence that has been, just out of default. That's how it's functioned. So I really appreciate all the work and the legal issues you are going through and such. And thank you very much.
Any other comments?
I'd just like to briefly say that I'm very much in favor of looking into things like alternative designs and exceptions in order to make the reality that we want to see more likely. I think a lot of really interesting designs have come about because of interesting or unique constraints, including sometimes trees that they want to save. And I'm also in favor of looking at things like, for instance, depending on incentives that we look at, perhaps waiving an administrative fee if they're doing what we would consider the best outcome of a design. That might reduce the overall financial burden on people and also kind of gel towards the actual result that we're trying to get. That's all.
I'll go. Thank you for the report. Support a lot of it. Few things that I was thinking about, particularly with the example of the hillside being, a 12, 15, 20,000 square foot lot. And then yet only 3 trees are going back. It seems to me the 1 tree per 1,000 square feet of build out is a maybe too simplistic way of looking at that requirement. And maybe we need to be a little bit broader with that to cover the various sizes of lots that we have to encourage those larger lots to take advantage of their ability to add to the trees versus the smaller lots that don't have the room. So that 1 per 1,000 just doesn't seem to me to be pushing that agenda much. So I think there's an opportunity there. As I said earlier, I'm a big proponent of more proactively managing trees so that they're not out of control and so that we can have better neighbor relations and can encourage these things to happen. A lot of these trees get planted right on the property line and that's without the neighbor's consent. and then they're stuck with it. So I think that kind of goes back to somebody's suggestion of more proactive design opportunities. And really, if you're going to say we have a 6,000 square foot lot, typically, it would be really good to see a tree here, a tree there, and a tree there, and giving them zone opportunities that helps encourage better design. Because oftentimes they just get stuck on the back fence. And I think that also thinking about that more proactively will help with the fact that these ADUs are also going on that back fence and are going to then strip out more ways of putting in trees. So, you know, as much as we had an FAR to try and minimize overbuilding on small lots, the state has gone the other direction. And so now we're not even in control of half of that. So I think some reach out on that and giving more tools will actually help a better outcome. And I think that goes in line with what you're trying to develop in your report, you know, and in the tools that you're trying to develop. So I think that that would be a great way. Thank you.
I actually just met with the fire chief, Christy, I believe her name is, at a property in Hillsborough, and had a 1-hour lesson with her about defensive space and how to keep, you know, trees away from the house and shrubs and all that other stuff. And I think when we're looking at these plans, because of the insurance issues that we're seeing on the residential side of the sales of these homes, this has become a huge problem for us as realtors and homeowners in our community. And so maybe with this plan, what we can actually start to look at is what are these insurance companies trying to mandate, and how do we program that in this landscape plan, right? Because we're going to have to. I mean, people need to be able to get insurance, and we're having a big challenge that way right now. But I'd like to keep that in mind when we're having if we have somebody that's going to help us with plan.
Thank you so much for all that's great work and with working with all of these other commissions and the public. I second everything that my fellow commissioners have stated so well. And I just want to say that I think it's very exciting to be integrating our role as planning commissioners in more with the tree preservation, landscape design. I think oftentimes we see the landscape design as kind of a secondary thing required as part of a permit submission or a design review submission, and myself included as an architect. But I think that this can be very exciting for us to be thinking more proactively. And I think if we were given some tools and some type of some planning guidelines from the tree perspective, that could really help us to create some, you know, better properties and reforest our city.
Anybody else? The only thing I would say as a builder is, you know, I love trees as a homeowner and as a resident of Burlingame as a builder. We just need to be careful of how much our restrictions put undue burden on our homeowners. Obviously, we have a high demand area. It's not an issue today, but we don't want to go into a negative flow of value because people are limited on what they can do on their lots. And so it's just to make sure that it's a balancing act, right? To make sure that we're making proper restriction that benefits the city, but also doesn't, you know, shoot us in the foot at the same time. Well, with that.
Can I just say one more thing? I'm sorry. I know it was not for this evening's thing, but I do feel that just because of what you just said, we have become much more limited in the space that remains on the lot. And part of it is because we have been generous with garages and things that we don't count as lot coverage or towards square footage, because we wanted a garage in the back, for example. And then came the whole ADU issue where they don't count. And so I feel that it would behoove us at a later date if we're going to be working together, to really look at where can we work on the zoning? Where can we pull things in? Where can we start counting garages? Because that was a freebie. Now people end up doing the attached garages now anyway. So it's, feel like the stuff that we meant as goodwill to encourage development, we can't control anymore because this whole umbrella has come on top of it it supersedes everything. So our buildable area, it all comes together. That you reduce the buildable area, so you reduce the root area. We've reduced everything that every habitable space, for any tree. And so I just feel like there's some cleanup, and I would love to see that happen in some form with staff who deal with this every day. And you, and maybe some of us a subcommittee in the future. I think that would be really worthwhile to see where we can get some space back.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was it for me.
Any other comments? Okay, great. Well, there's no motions needed. This is a study item, right? So
Thank you very much for the feedback and thank you very much to the public. There will be a meeting in front of the city council with a very similar presentation to get their feedback next month. So if you're interested, please look out for that. It should be, do you know the exact date? June 17th will be the city council meeting for that. Thank you.
thank you, City Arborist Holtz. Appreciate your presentation. All right, on to agenda item number 8, consent calendar. Items on the consent calendar are considered to be routine. They are acted on simultaneously unless separate discussion and/or action is requested by the applicant, a member of the public, or a commissioner prior to the time on the motion to adopt. This evening, we have one item on the consent calendar, item 8A 124 Bloomfield Road. Would any,
We do have one recusal.
Commissioner Pfaff needs to recuse. We'll let her brief. All right, as the Commissioner Pfaff exits, would any member of the public or planning commission like to pull this item for discussion? Seeing none, are any motions?
I'll make a motion that we approve the consent calendar, including 124 Bloomfield Road.
I'll second that motion.
We have a motion by Commissioner Schmidt and a second by Commissioner Camarado. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Camarado,
Aye.
Commissioner Schmid,
Aye.
Commissioner Say,
Aye.
Acting Vice Chair Shores,
Aye.
and Chair Lowenthal.
Aye. The motion passes 5-0-1-1. An action by the Planning Commission is appealable to the City Council within 10 days of the Planning Commission's action. If the Planning Commission's action has not been appealed or called up for review by the City Council by 5 p.m. on the 10th day, the action becomes final. In order to be effective, appeals must be in writing and must be accompanied by an appeal fee of $784, which includes noticing costs. Congratulations. Agenda item number 9, regular action items. We can bring Commissioner Pfaff back in.
She went to the restroom.
Oh, that's right, restroom. Right, welcome back, Commissioner Pfaff.
Thank you.
We will move on to item 9A, 14 Channing Road. If you are the applicant and are attending the meeting via Zoom, please raise your hand so that we may be prepared for you to speak at the appropriate time. If possible, we ask that you also turn on your video at that time. Were any commissioners not able to visit the project site, or do any commissioners wish to note any ex parte communications regarding the project? Seeing none and no recusals. Let the record note that all commissioners present have visited the project site. Can we get a staff report, please?
Yes, the subject property is a area lot with an existing single-unit dwelling and a detached garage. The applicant is proposing to demolish 50% of the existing first floor walls and the entire second floor, which is located within the existing roof structure. The project includes a major renovation of the first floor, a first floor addition at the rear of the dwelling, and a new second story. The project also includes converting a portion of the existing detached garage into an accessory dwelling unit. When this project came before the Planning Commission as a study item, it required front setback variances to both the first and second floor walls, both of which were new. However, the project has been revised to retain more than 50% of the existing first floor walls, and the existing conforming first floor wall will remain with construction. The applicant is now requesting one variance to the new second floor with a front setback of 13 feet 9 inches, where 20 feet is the minimum required. The proposed landscape plan shows 3 new 24-inch box-sized landscape trees to be planted on the site. For reference, the staff report lists design review criteria, required findings for a variance, suggested findings for both a requested design review and variance. I believe the designer and owners are in the audience and can take any planning and questions. And I can take questions of staff at this time if you have any.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? Seeing none, I'm going to open the public hearing. Would the applicant please come forward and state your name and anything else you'd like to add about your project?
Good evening, Commission. Tim Rudines, project designer. Like to just, lightly touch on the 10 points that we had responded to from our, original meeting. I think, we kind of highlighted and responded to all of them correctly and in your favor, kind of like removing the metal roof, scaling back the size of the arched or the radiused window, pushing back that second floor to give it a little bit more ungulation. We've also worked hand in hand with the planning department to make sure that the first floor was an actual remodel. That's why it took a little bit longer to get back on. I think we're in agreement on how we're going to do it and do it per code. I don't really have much to say other than that. We have great outreach with the neighbors. Everyone's really, thrilled for us to get going. So, and on the landscape end, we can probably add another tree. There's probably a good spot, right? As you're looking at it on the 3D, right by the entry door, could probably be a good spot for an extra tree. So I'm here to answer any questions, and the owners are here as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Any questions for the applicant?
She has one and I have one.
Commissioner
Hey,
Amaro?
No,
Amaro.
thanks, Tim. The 2 windows on either side of the front door, do you think you could get those to go all the way down to the ground?
We could do that.
Just to have it kind of, I feel like they're just kind of free floating, and thought maybe you could just kind of bring that down so that the door, I don't know, just looking at that.
We
Can
have
I
to match
add on?
the existing entry, because of, that's something we can talk to planning about. I'm okay doing it. It's just, we have to match the
I understand.
existing opening size, otherwise it's called the new wall,
Oh, got it.
right?
Correct. Okay,
Could I offer a suggestion on that?
yeah.
Maybe not so much the window going down, but maybe with applied trim, you take the intent of the window down, but maintain the wall. And that would make that look less like a T.
I can do that. If we can do that as like a planning approval, if we approve it tonight, I can do that.
And then maybe we can get the city arborist to put a tree where those bushes are actually right there in the front. That would give us 2 extra trees.
Sure. Street trees aren't included though. But yeah,
I know, but it's the nice to have.
I understand.
So, I just have a quick question. So you mentioned the window, I think that was actually my comment, the window was kind of, I thought, large, the circular window.
Yep.
So it's really the trim you took down. The window's the same size, right? I measured.
We did bring down the window, I think 4 inches.
Oh, okay.
And the trim also went down.
Okay.
So
And then I just had a question. The piece of the roof that comes on the side, which I guess is part of the plane behind it. How actually wide is that? The little strip down on the far right?
It's probably about 14 to 16 inches.
Okay. All right. I think those were all my questions. Thank you.
Commissioner Say?
Yes, Tim, any reason why you wouldn't add one more step to your stoop so that your entry level
We can do that.
at the front door is similar to the stoop?
That- Mhm.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant?
I have one more,
Yep.
sorry. It feels like do we only have one gable by that front door? Are there any around the perimeter of the house? It feels like it's just kind of out of place, like it's just one, it's just sitting there. Can we add some extra ones
Or
around?
one on the left hand. Did you forget to put one on the
Here.
left of the door?
Are you referring to the knee bracket?
Bracket.
Okay. We can add one if you wanted to.
Well, I feel like it's not either get rid of it completely or add some around the entire project. We have some on the other side, on the rear elevation.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah,
We do, because the second story goes cantilevers over the backyard. We can definitely put
Do you
a
plan-
second bracket there. The reason the bracket's not there is because we were intending to put the light fixture there.
I figured that.
Because we had to do the large.
Just
and-
kind of play with it.
Yeah, that's fine.
Come
I
up-
can do that.
It's not an absolute.
No.
Thanks, Tim.
Any other questions for the applicant? Okay. Do we have any members of the public attending in person who wish to speak on this item, or did we receive any public comment emails? Please note that speakers are limited to 3 minutes.
We did receive one public comment email from Mary Calben. The comment is, what's going on at 14 Channing with the squatters and junk in front of the house?
Okay. I'm going to close the public hearing. Commissioners, do we have any comments and or motions?
Well, I'll go. I was very disturbed at this house, the variance before, but I very much appreciate you sticking by the rules and that they were just dealing now with the second story variance. And I think it looks pretty good. You're pretty limited there on the front, and I think you're gonna need to be more creative with kind of creating a distance from the sidewalk, sort of visually with your plantings. I think you can do it, but I appreciate the changes. Did you have to work on those brackets or something?
Well,
Okay. I actually liked the adaptive reuse of what you did the first time. But yet, I really appreciate the changes that you've made and the sacrifices. Because you've pushed things around, reworked them to get us, the few feet of pushback on the second floor, which really actually does improve that elevation quite a bit. And so huge thank you for that, because I think it makes that front elevation work better. So otherwise like it.
I agree. And I think driving by around the neighborhood again today, I think the new design is not dissimilar to lots of the other homes in the neighborhood. So I think some of the massing is more similar, even though you still have that second floor variance, which I can support at this time. And if there's no other comments, I will bring this project back. I would move that we approve this project and including the items that we discussed this evening, that's minor edits.
I will include those items.
And we'll probably want to.
Which, should I repeat them? Or?
We'll definitely want to put those items on the record. It sounds like there's still a little bit of issue on the brackets side.
It's just consistency.
But we do need to define it to make sure that whatever we put in the approval, is something that the applicant's able to meet, or of course you
I
can
will,
back on another, but we want to make sure that we list, if we do a motion to approve every single item would like it.
so I'll try it. So I think one of the items was addressing some paneling or trim detail below the side lights adjacent to the entry door so that the side lights appear to be full length. And working on a bit more distributed corbels around the house to balance out the one that we see at the front. And then adding another step to the front stoop so that the entry level at the front door is similar to that of the front porch. Is that it?
That's
Sounds good. Would you be able to, would staff be able to make those changes, especially regarding the brackets, since we haven't delineated? Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you for the motion.
You're welcome.
Second.
Agree, I can do that.
All right, we have a motion by Commissioner Say, seconded by Commissioner Schmidt. Can we have do we have any discussion on the motion? I think we just did that. Can we have a roll call vote?
Commissioner Camerado,
Aye.
Commissioner Pfaff,
That's you.
Oh, aye. Sorry, I'm not used to being called so quick.
Commissioner Schmidt,
Aye.
Commissioner Say,
Aye.
Acting Vice Chair Shores,
Aye.
and Chair Lowenthal.
Aye. Motion passes 6-0-0-1. An action by the Planning Commission is appealable to the City Council within 10 days of the Planning Commission's action. If the Planning Commission's action has not been appealed or called up for review by the City Council by 5 p.m. on the 10th day, the action becomes final. In order to be effective, appeals must be in writing and must be accompanied by an appeal fee of $780, which includes noticing costs. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Next up, 9B, 1602 Forest View Avenue. If you are the applicant and are attending via Zoom, please raise your hand so we may be prepared for you to speak at the appropriate time. If possible, we ask that you also turn on your video at that time. Were any commissioners not able to visit the project site, or do any commissioners wish to note any ex parte communications regarding this project? Seeing none, no recusals. Let the record note that all commissioners present have visited the project site. Can we hear the staff report, please?
The subject property is an interior lot and contains an existing two-story single-unit dwelling with an attached garage. The applicant is proposing a 147 square foot first floor addition, a 114 square foot second floor addition at the rear of the house, and to enclose the existing second floor balcony at the front of the house. The number of bedrooms would not increase with the proposed project, and the existing parking on site meets code requirements. There are no existing trees that are proposed to be removed, and the trees existing on the site meet the tree reforestation ordinance requirements. Design review criteria and suggested findings are listed in the staff report, and I can take questions of staff at this time.
Any questions for staff? Nope. All right, I'm going to open the public hearing. Would the applicant please come forward and state your name and anything else you would like to add about your project?
My name's Edward Calantes. I'm the property owner. I have nothing else to really add. This is the second time I'm here on this. Yep,
Great, thank you very much.
you're welcome.
Any questions for the applicant?
Just a quick one.
Say.
Are you proposing a new garage door?
Yes,
Is it going to look like the one in the rendering or the one drawings?
we haven't selected it yet, so we have an interior decorator we're working with, so we're figuring that out.
Hmm. Do you know if you're gonna likely have glass lights across the top?
You know, we've got so many design issues going on in this house right now. I mean, really haven't sat down. I'd be guessing. Personally, I like to have, you know, glass up there, I guess, to see. It kind of adds, you know, to the ambiance of the garage. I like that. But, you know, we're in the process of picking marble and light fixtures and floors and, you know, we're just,
Do you know what material the garage door will be made of?
I would say wood. I mean, but we haven't selected that. So, I mean, other than wood, what are the other options?
There's steel, there's
No steels.
fiberglass. Okay, so I think that, so it's a design element of a home, so that's why I'm asking the question. Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Okay. Do we have any members of the public attending in person who wish to speak on this item, or did we receive any public comment emails?
No public comment emails?
Okay. Then I'm going to close the public hearing. Commissioners, do we have any comments? And or motions?
I share Commissioner Say's concern over the garage door because it leaves us exposed without a decision. I don't know if we could make that a condition of approval that it is a wood door with glass lights, and then that's reviewable by staff. And should that not be the case, then it could get kicked back into re-review.
Yes, you could do that.
Is there disagreement on that?
Yeah, I agree with that.
Works for me.
Yeah, works for me.
Okay. Other discussion? I want to make my motion before I forget it.
Well, I want to say that the reason why this is kind of coming to the forefront is because it's at the front of the house. There's not a detached garage at the back. It is fairly large, and so it's something that's nothing there today when I went by. So just, we don't know what it's going to look like, and the drawings are not consistent, so that's why the questions.
Okay, so then I'll make a motion that we approve this project with the condition that the garage door be wood and with glass lights, to be verified by planning staff prior to building permit.
I'll second that motion.
All right, I have a motion by Commissioner Schmidt, seconded by Commissioner Say. Is there any further discussion on that motion? Seeing none, may we please have a roll call vote?
Commissioner Camerado?
Aye.
Commissioner Pfaff?
Aye.
Commissioner Schmidt?
Aye.
Commissioner Say?
Aye.
Acting Vice Chair Shores?
Aye.
And Chair Lowenthal?
Aye. Motion passes 6-0-0-1.
Thank you.
An action by the Planning Commission is appealable to the City Council within 10 days of the Planning Commission's action. If the Planning Commission's action has not been appealed or called up for review by the city by 5 p.m. on the 10th day, the action becomes final. In order to be effective, appeals must be in writing and must be accompanied by an appeal fee of $784, which includes noticing costs. Congratulations.
Thank you. And thank you, Amelia, for your help. Okay.
Have a nice night. Next up, 9C, 475.5 Rollins Road. You are the applicant and are attending the meeting via Zoom. Please raise your hand so we may be prepared for you to speak at the appropriate time. If possible, we would ask that you also turn on your video at that time. Were any commissioners not able to visit the project site, or do any commissioners wish to note any ex parte communications regarding this project? No ex parte, no recusal. Let the record note that all commissioners present have visited the project site. Can we hear the staff report, please?
Yes, planning staff would note that this site is a flag lot with driveway access out to Rollins Road. The parcel has only 3 sides, and the front of the lot was established as the property line on the southwest side, sharing a rear property line with the houses that faced White Road. The side of the subject site was established as the north property line, and the rear property line was established as the east property line, which shares a rear property line with the houses that face Lexington Way. This project was previously approved by the plan for design review and a front setback variance for a new 2-story single-unit dwelling, detached garage, and an accessory dwelling unit. Construction on the project is complete, and when the project planner visited the site for a final inspection, the planner discovered a number of as-built revisions to the approved project. The applicant is now requesting an amendment to design review for the as-built changes. The revisions to the approved plans are to the exterior of the building and include, but are not limited to, a change in the materials for the approved windows, the second floor panel siding and natural wood siding, the elimination of several windows, an overdoor awning and window trims, and a garage door with a different window design. The architect for the project is present at tonight's hearing and is available for Planning Commission questions. Should the commission wish to take action on the project, there are suggested findings for design review listed in the staff report. If there are any questions of staff, I can take those at this time.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? Commissioner Pfaff?
Yes, I just, I'm trying to understand, what happened here. Is it, so our inspectors went out and found these items done, or they were informed that there were changes and to come look? What was the order?
So our process continued as it's designed to happen. The construction happened, our building inspectors went out at various times. They aren't looking for material choices unless those materials are related to building code. So it wasn't until the construction was complete and the planner was called to the site, which is how we handle things, that the as-built revisions were noted.
And was it, do you know, was it the contractor who changed on site, or was it, do you have any idea who decided that, or?
I do not, but I'm sure you can ask that question of the architect and owners.
All right,
Yeah.
thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Okay, I'm going to open the public hearing. Would the applicant please come forward and state your name and anything else you would like to add about your project?
Hi, my name's Brad Gonko with Architecture. I'm the architect, and the project are all here for any questions that you might have. So this project started in 2019. Basically a young family building their home for for themselves and their kids. And during construction, they've encountered a number of issues, obviously, that many of us are familiar with now, including some severe supply chain issues, crazy cost escalations, et cetera. And so, and they were also unfamiliar with process of construction revisions during construction. So they and the contractors made multiple decisions all along, doing their very best to continue to comply with the design intent of the project. And so some of the changes that you're hearing about are a change from a natural wood siding to a faux wood siding. I honestly think that the faux wood siding looks pretty good, and it is much more durable and will, remain attractive for a much longer period of time without, regular maintenance than the natural wood siding would have. And this, I believe, is the same exact product that was used recently on the Burlingame Community Center. So I know that the community has seen this product before. It's a nice, high quality product. The Parklex panels that were originally shown for the top floor of the building were a number of different things. I mean, one, they were shown as a very muted texture and color, which Parklex does make. That particular pattern was, I think, my understanding was very difficult to try to get with time frame necessary for construction, and frankly looked a lot like stucco. And so what they ended up moving to is stucco with control joints following pattern similar to the Parklex panels. This is actually, I believe, more in keeping with the surrounding neighborhood than the Parklex would have been, which is not something that's represented anywhere else in the neighborhood. There's the question of the projecting fins at the upper windows. Those were not part of the original planning approval. There was a rendering that showed them that way. That was not necessarily the design intent, but during construction, they were not installed. They were, the question came up as to whether or not to do projecting fins. The discussion, I believe, went the route of we're not part of the planning approval, and so they're not required. And also, the availability of finding someone who was able to make those at that time was proved to be nearly impossible. Some of the other changes that you see, like the window and the awning, that was primarily structural. Basically, there was in order to have an awning at that location, it would have required a beam that the structural engineer had not incorporated, and basically columns on either side to support it in order to allow that to cantilever. And so, really that was more of a revision to account for the fact that the original design, had not been structurally designed, completely. And other than that, I mean, those are the primary revisions on the sides of this house that face the neighbors, that in any kind of visible way, as you've probably seen if you visited the site. This is a very strange triangular shaped, completely landlocked site. And the any other changes that were done by the homeowners during construction really occur in the back alley area, where this is minimally, if at all, visible to neighbors right now because of the landscaping that was required as part of the approval process, will be basically invisible within a relatively short period of time. And, yeah, we'll answer any questions that you have.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions for the applicant?
Yeah, I do. I wonder if you're, do you know what actually, when these items were happening, sorry, this was something you were unaware about, which you were unaware? So the
For the
contractor
part, yeah.
made these decisions together with the homeowner, not understanding that it would be good to check in with the planning department about things changing, about the materials and such.
Yes, that's the case.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Okay. Do we have any members of the public attending in person who would wish to speak on this item, or did we receive any public comment emails?
We received no public comment emails.
Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing. Commissioners, do we have any comments or any motion?
I'll go. The siding actually, I like. I would have liked the wood siding better, but I actually like the material that you chose as a substitute, and I think that works pretty well. I felt like the stucco really wasn't an issue either. It looked good as a whole and made the elevations work. My biggest concern is the removing of the siding on the lower portion of the this elevation right here, 3, 4, and really the next two elevations as it wraps around. But I think that this would be a lot better with the siding finished off the way it was originally proposed in the approved design. I actually, because when I walked onto the property, that was the elevation I saw first. I didn't walk around the back to see the other side. I just saw the front door and then the elevation here that goes along the fence. And I could see it from the street too, as I looked over the other properties. So for me, that's something that I think should be included as part of this design that we approved. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Schmidt. Anybody else?
I have a question about the windows. I'm not quite sure. The front elevation by the front door, the detail of those top windows, or maybe it's not that elevation. Let's see, what elevation is it? Is it the south elevation? Yes, it's the south elevation of what we originally approved, which is A 3.1. It feels like the windows are just kind of flush and there's no relief or no dimension to these windows. Thickness between the two windows, there's a disconnect on the windows, and maybe it's the kind of windows that they used. So for me, the windows are kind of flooring considering what we originally had approved.
Yeah, Commissioner Singh.
So, I went to go look at the house, today and didn't quite know how to approach which side. So I went up the flag driveway and then saw, I guess, the most prominent elevation, which is what you see at the garage and the front door. But then figured that the side where the backyard would be used would be the second most prominent elevation for them. So I went along the side, instead of the right side that you went, Commissioner Schmidt, I went across the left side and saw the back with the siding, and then I kind of felt like I was invading their privacy, so I didn't want to go all the way around. But I would say that I'm satisfied with those two views. I do feel disappointed that for the homeowner, that the areas where they're enjoying probably the house from the outside, which is at the ground level on those other two sides of the home, that the siding is missing. From kind of the public perspective, I don't think anyone can see it. I went around to the backside. Is it Winchester or whatever the street is back there? And I could see the second floor, but can't really see the main floor. So it's really kind of, I think, just a loss for the homeowner in terms of the enjoyment of the view of the siding on that kind of side yard and the end of the triangle on the far end at the apex of the triangle. So I also think the windows are a little bit flat. They look a little bit more like a commercial building, but this is a modern minimalist style home, and the architect was describing how the original extended fins were not a part of the approved design. I don't recall that they weren't, but in any case, those are kind of how I received the changes.
So I'm going to go. I was not on here when this was approved. And I also will say I didn't want to invade your privacy, so I didn't walk around into the areas that you're describing. But my impression, I agree with all the comments so far about the siding being lacking in the areas where you were going to put it originally. There's something about it for me that looks very, how do I say this? Like a trailer, like a temporary building that's on some lot while another building is being built, like something temporary, because the depth that was on there from the fins, and something is missing. And I don't know what can be done at this point to build that back in. But in addition to the warmth, it had a warmth to it that I find lacking on the sides that don't have the wood where it was supposed to be with wood siding. I actually prefer the garage door that you used in the current version rather than what was planned. I think that doesn't bother me. I like it. But this flatness, I don't know that this would have been approved like this that's what I'm thinking. I would have had trouble approving this if it would have come to us brand new like this. So those are my comments.
Can I add to that?
Yeah.
I mean, I think Commissioner Schmidt, were you on the commission with this project? No, I think it was just Commissioner Camerado and I, right? There was a lot of discussion about the materials and where the materials should be applied. So I do recall all of that. And what was approved, of course, is where we landed. And that's why I say I'm disappointed in that. And I think it's a loss for the homeowner because nobody else really can see these views.
I think the question is, if this project came before us the way it is now, would we have approved it? And I don't think we would have. And now we're in a situation that is, I'm sure, financially hard for the property owners. Because they would have to go back and redo things that we would require them to do. Then the question becomes, at what impact does that have on the neighborhood when it's a property that sits back? And where do we draw the line, right? I'm not so worried about the paneling. I don't like the flatness that I think Commissioner Pfaff and I are suggesting. But then how do you fix that without breaking the stucco and breaking out windows? And I'm not a builder, I'm not an architect, but that I would suspect is financially a hardship. And also, I would think by construction, it's not easy with construction. I mean, it'll look worse if you try to fix it almost. I'm not sure. I would think that if you're redoing stucco, you'd have to do that whole wall. So I'm disappointed because I know that this went through a couple of rounds when we were on the commission. And I know that there were a couple of commissioners that didn't approve this project when it came in front of us in the end, because they didn't think it was going to be built correctly. And that's what we got. The front door is very flat. It doesn't have that, it just feels like they just kind of slapped it on. So that being said, I think that I would like to have some of that wood paneling for them. I think it would tie the whole house together. I think it would be the less impactful on them financially. I don't think breaking out the wall and trying to put in structural beams to do this cantilever front, that cantilever door covering is worth it. I mean, that was one of our biggest concerns, I think, when it came to us the first time around, was how was that going to kind of float there structurally, and that we were guaranteed it was going to work, and then it didn't get built. So that's where I am. I think maybe just doing some of that wood paneling and making it look a little bit more, I don't know how impactful that might be to owners or to construction wise.
Where I am is in a vacuum, where nothing else matters. I'm not very happy with what's been with what's happened to this house. And it's a dangerous precedent because there's so many things that were glossed over, and it was not a unanimous decision of passing this back in 2019. But this isn't in a vacuum. This is a very hard house to see from the street. It's not obvious in any direction, and that matters to me because at the end of the day, we're making these decisions for our fellow residents of Burlingame and making sure that we're making decisions that affect the community as a benefit. I feel like the right thing to do in context would be to make them do some of these things, but it is a large bill, a large tax for that. And I don't get the sense that this was malicious. I do feel like there's some ignorance here. I just absolutely blame the contractor. That contractor should be held accountable. Pretty abhorrent that was allowed without any sort of risk assessment. Unless there was a risk assessment, it was just ignored. We don't know. But I, as a contractor, take responsibility for following a set of plans, especially one that's been approved. So all that being said, I don't disagree with Commissioner Camarado. I'd be on board with any sort of things that we would want them to do, but adding wood cladding does mess with the waterproofing. It's not minimal. It's not something you just glue on. So it is invasive. It would be expensive. As would be changing out the windows, as would be adding cantilevers. Which, like I said, normally I would say, sorry, tough luck. You're gonna have to do all these things. But because of the location of this home and quite frankly, it's the best home in that little area. I mean, it's modern, it's brought up to code, it's, you know, it does all those things that are good. So I guess I'm on the fence of doing whatever we come to as a group or just letting it go through and moving on.
I know I think it's very challenging. This is a complicated one. I want to add to it in the owner's defense or the contractor's defense, that, the time of construction for this home through the pandemic, when we all know that there were, resource supply chain issues. I don't know how much of that is to say for, the lack of siding once they had found even the faux siding. But also, what was my second thought? That this predated what we now have is a system of everybody assigning their name to realizing that any changes to be made are to be brought forth sooner than later. So, and because of its location, and I also agree, it's like the best looking house in that cul-de-sac or that area. And because there's limited visibility of it, that's why I keep saying that I think it's a disappointment for the owners, for their enjoyment, but not really for anybody else.
But then it's going to get sold at some point in time. And so maybe this owner is not as worried about it, but it does not meet the spirit of what we intended. Now, maybe this particular siding can't be put back in an effective way without messing it up, because you're right, it's not double stick tape. I get that. But I think before we approve the changes as is, I would like to see an effort put into trying to come up with a solution for that siding that makes that elevation, that dresses that elevation up, because it's not the back of the house.
Maybe you
I
could,
only walked in.
What about paint color?
yeah, maybe it could just be
I
paint.
know. What about paint color?
Maybe it just looks like it was the back of the house that got forgotten, but yet it's not. And I'm not saying it's gotta be the siding. I'm saying it needs to be a solution that offers us a little bit more warmth that gets us closer back to the original design intent. So I'm open for those.
Maybe they pull that gray
Mm-hmm.
and pull it through that back portion to give it a little bit of warmth. I mean, it's something.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the lack of the wood siding is highly detrimental. It's the single most outstanding issue in the as-builts for sure. I like the other ideas of either finding some other kind of similar siding solution or just paint or something else to kind of bring more cohesiveness and thought to those facades. I also just wanted to mention the few studies that were in here show that you can kind of see the first story depending on where you're standing, but the second story is a lot more obvious. And so it is comparatively a smaller thing, but the aluminum fins along the side of the windows, if those are not invasive to install, if those can be bolted in afterwards, I think that's pretty reasonable to ask, because that's going to be the most visible part of this building to Rollins Road, to any neighboring lot, is the second story. So if that's not invasive, I think that's generally a non-issue to ask.
I don't know of any bolt-on fins. They may exist. So I guess what we're all saying is that they should come back with a proposal how to remedy this based on what we're saying.
So I would propose that we continue this and give the applicant an opportunity to hear what our feedback is and come back with a solution that is more in line with what we're looking for. And they can explore alternatives. I don't think we're saying it's gotta be. We need something closer to where we want to be than where we are.
I agree with that.
Is that enough direction for the applicant?
I think we have to make a motion.
I think so. Yep. We do need a motion to continue it. It sounds.
I make a motion that we continue.
I'll second that motion.
Okay. We have a motion by Commissioner Schmidt, second by Commissioner Camarado.
I have a question. I mean, is there any, because I mean,
Sorry,
we're.
Chair, you'd have to open up the public hearing. Excuse me, hold on a second.
Sorry.
The chair needs to open up the public hearing and then for that, if you wish to, and then we also need to take public comment.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and open the public hearing. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, we're in lieu of coming back, I mean, we're open to conditions of approval if you, I mean, I think we could all probably agree that continue at least using a paint that matches the wood color for the remainder of the lower floor would help tie this whole thing together.
I think we want you to come back to us with some ideas,
Okay.
having heard what we just expressed. We understand that we don't want to be too invasive, but if you could come to us with some renditions and some ideas,
Mhm.
that would help us kind of move in some sort of direction, whether it's paint, whether it's fins,
Material.
whether, I don't know. But
Mhm, mhm.
if you guys could kind of get together and come up with something, that would help us out.
So giving you a condition of approval to paint it leaves it open because you could paint it brick red and it's gonna
Well,
look ugly.
I would
Right?
be a brown to
I
match the
know,
wood
but
siding, yeah.
But it puts us in a hard spot of putting that condition of approval on something that is a subjective.
Oh.
So I think I think you should come back with a paint color that you're saying, I'm trying to match the siding, I'm
Mhm.
going gray. I'm not, I don't know that we're here saying it's gotta be
Brown.
cedar brown
Yeah,
to match the panel.
yeah. Mhm.
But it has to not be looking like the back of a white stucco building.
Mhm. Okay.
So we're giving you the opportunity to propose a cost-effective but style-effective way of solving our concern.
Question for staff. Can we stipulate a paint?
No, so through the chair, while you can encourage that they come back and look at an option to repaint the lower section a different color, design review doesn't look at color. So it can't be conditioned that it be a certain color. And the future owner could also repaint the house any color they want. So just keep that in mind.
Well, we're trying to come up with and that's why it's got to be some sort of cost-effective compromise that helps us get closer to where we want and gets it finished for you guys.
So we're looking at paint colors possibly, or alternative for that siding, or some sort of fins.
And/or.
And/or.
maybe
Or screen?
very bothered by the flat. If there's some way to, I don't know, because I'm not a builder, but
Maybe you could just look at some options.
maybe you can look at some options, yeah.
Well, the most cost-effective way to do it would be doing some sort of standoff where you are inserting some sort of bolt or bracket off the building and then attaching the facade to that. That would be the easiest way to waterproof. And then you're not having to rip apart the rest of it.
Mm. Or maybe some other modern design idea. I don't know. I'm sure, I don't know why I'm envisioning some like stainless steel, like
That will be cheap.
it's just something that's maybe decorative, but that actually would look really pretty on that house.
Yeah, I
But-
mean, there are nice bolt-on.
Just something to give it some sense of
Dimension.
Mhm.
because it's just
So
too flat.
Mhm.
and
So
Industrial.
that's why we're saying go back, think about a couple of ideas that are economical
Mhm.
and that might make it feel a little bit more welcoming on that second floor especially, and the bottom floor.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. Hi, Amy. Nice to meet you. My husband. Yeah.
Hello.
So one, sorry, look, we went through a lot. We didn't mean to like not follow process. So I just want to acknowledge and own that. Like we totally own that. So, but yeah, we're happy to talk through different ideas. We do want to be economical. Obviously, it's been like a really long process for us. And we love living in the house. It's been great for the kids. And so that all has been really fantastic. But yeah, we yeah, I think we're really open to the idea of painting. That's something we talked about before, but as an option, like to sort of bring it together, we see that there's different colors, like, that could potentially be used, whether it's brown or some sort of gray maybe that could be used. So we hear that feedback from you all. So, yeah.
When we selected the windows, the direction that we were given was that we should source aluminum windows. And so we found options within that range. As far as the trim is concerned, we'll do what we can to find good options. I'm unfamiliar with the product lines that are out there. Hopefully we can find something that was within our budget and that can, but
A colorist, a painting colorist might even be able, and just an idea, someone who specializes in paint colors could maybe help you tie the whole house together. So, don't think you have to do it on your own, but there are people out there, it doesn't cost that much, that you can hire that can kind of help you with some colors to kind of make it a little more on the warm side. So just an idea for you.
And I think a lot of us are sympathetic of attempting to build a house in the middle of the pandemic. I can't think of a more logistically challenging time in living memory. It's just unfortunate that we've come now to this situation at this place in time. So.
And this was our first time, doing any kind of project like this, and certainly in the Bay Area. So, that's on us. So we apologize for that.
So we recommend you guys go back to the comments we said, see what's feasible, see what you can do, and then come back with a proposal. And if you feel like paint's all you can do, then do it, and then let us see it, see if that may push the envelope. But we think you should look at all these different items, from the facade to the windows to potentially a color change, and then come back, I think, is what we're trying to get at.
And we feel they add value
Mm-hmm.
to you.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any other members of the public who wish to speak? Or do we get any last minute emails?
No emails.
Okay, then I'm going to close the public hearing again. Would you like to restate your motion?
I move that we continue this and give the applicant an opportunity to revise.
I'll second the motion.
Right, continuance motion by Commissioner Schmidt, seconded by Commissioner Say. Any more discussion? No? Can we get a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Camerado,
Aye.
Commissioner Pfaff,
Aye.
Commissioner Schmidt,
Aye.
Commissioner Say,
Aye.
Acting Vice Chair Shores,
Aye.
and Chair Lowenthal.
Aye. Motion passes 6-0-1. Any action by the, well, this is appeal. Yeah, don't need to see that part. Okay,
This action is not appealable.
not appealable. Thank you very much. Have a nice evening. Next one up, 9D, 1915 Carmelita Avenue. If you are the applicant and are attending the meeting, oh, we have a recusal. If you are the applicant and are attending the meeting via Zoom, please raise your hand so we may be prepared for you to speak at the appropriate time. If possible, we ask that you also turn on your video at that time. Are any commissioners not able to visit the project site, or do any commissioners wish to note any ex parte communications regarding the project? No, and we will note that Commissioner Say using from item 9D. Let the record note that all commissioners present have visited the project site. Can we hear the staff report, please?
The Planning Commission previously approved an application for design review for first and second story additions to an existing two-story house at 1915 Carmelita. The property owners decided to make some modifications during construction, which now require an application for amendment to the previously approved design review project. The as-built modifications outlined in the applicant's explanation letter include a revised front door, an addition of 32 square feet, which increased the lot coverage and the floor area for the property. The as-built lot coverage and floor area are still below the maximum allowed. A revised window heights and skylight locations, and a rear patio sliding door system without the approved divided lights. A representative for the project is here to answer commission questions. Should the Planning Commission choose to take action on this item this evening, there are suggested findings for design review in the staff report. I can take questions of staff at this time.
Great, thank you very much. Any questions for staff? Okay, Then we're going to open the public hearing. Would the applicant please come forward and state your name and anything else you'd like to about your project?
Online.
Good evening, commissioners. Can you hear me?
We can.
Oh, great. My name's Lauren Lee. I'm from Insight Design, and I am representing our clients, Anthony and Gail Moss, the owners of 1915 Carmelita Avenue. And I'm here to answer any questions that you may have regarding the amendment for the as-built changes to the approved design. These changes were discovered during construction due to a few interior requirements, one for the refrigerator width and the required jam size for the new patio door, which required the bump out addition along the south elevation to increase slightly. And as was presented, those changes are well within the FAR and lot coverage limitations. Along this south elevation, the existing windows were also modified to create a more consistent look along that elevation. Other items that were changed were the front door that were mentioned, and I believe those are the changes to the approved design. And again, I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Great, thank you very much. Any questions for the applicant? Nope, okay. Do we have any members of the public attending in person who wish to speak on this item, or did we receive any public comment emails?
We received no public comment emails.
Okay. I'm going to close the public hearing. Commissioners, any comments or motions?
I don't have any concerns with the changes. They seem very reasonable and within the style that was already approved. So I don't have any comments. Okay, then I'm going to make a motion that we approve the project as presented.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion to approve by Commissioner Schmidt, seconded by Commissioner Pfaff. Any discussion on the motion? No, maybe please have a roll call vote.
Commissioner Camerado?
Aye.
Commissioner Pfaff?
Aye.
Commissioner Schmidt?
Aye.
Acting Vice Chair Shores?
Aye.
And Chair Lowenthal?
Aye. Motion passes 5-0-1-1. Inaction by the Planning Commission is appealable to the City Council within 10 days of the Planning Commission's action. If the Planning Commission's action has not been appealed or called up for review by the City Council by 5 p.m. on the 10th day, the action becomes final. In order to be effective, appeals must be in writing and must be accompanied by an appeal fee of $784, which includes noticing costs. Congratulations. Welcome back, Commissioner Say. All right, we're on to item 9E. 1375 Burlingame Avenue. If you are the applicant and are attending the meeting via Zoom, please raise your hand so that we may be prepared for you to speak at the appropriate time. If possible, we ask that you also turn on your video at that time. Were any commissioners not able to visit the project site, or do any commissioners wish to note any ex parte communications regarding this project?
I have to be honest, I know the building. I couldn't figure out where this was. Up front on the left, there is something there already. Right, it's like a spa or something, yeah. Anyway, I have to be honest, I just couldn't place it, so. Anyway.
Thank you for the information.
Sure.
So, I mean, I guess I said, well, she went to the project site, so, but the record note that all commissioners present have visited the project site. Can we hear the staff report?
Yes, the applicant is requesting a conditional use permit to operate a Pilates studio in an existing commercial building at 1375 Burlingame Avenue, Suite 202A. A Pilates studio falls under the zoning code definition as a small-scale commercial recreation use. The existing building contains 3 floors, a basement level, ground level, and an upper level.
Mm.
The applicant is proposing to locate in Suite 202A on the upper floor, which was previously used as an office space. The tenant space has no pedestrian-level street frontage. The proposed business offers private Pilates sessions that match 1 hour and matches one instructor with 1 or 2 clients at a time. No construction or modifications to the tenant space or building are required or proposed. There is no intensification of use with the proposed Pilates studio, and so there is no additional parking required with this application. Staff would note that this application was brought directly to the Planning Commission as a regular action item due to the low impact nature of the business and size of the tenant space. However, if the commission feels there's a need for more discussion, this item may be placed on a future action calendar for a second review and/or public hearing with direction to the applicant. There are suggested findings for a conditional use permit in the staff report. That concludes the project introduction, and I can take questions of staff at this time.
Thank you very much. Any questions for staff?
Yes.
Commissioner Schmidt?
So when this tenant then leaves, does it revert back to its original office use? Does it remain as a small recreational use, or is this just an added arsenal to this space for the future?
Another small scale recreation use could take over this conditional use permit, or it could revert to any other permitted use.
Okay.
It also have to, that other commercial recreation use would have to follow the conditions of approval, and if it can't, then it would be, have to come back, yeah.
Any other questions for staff? Okay. I'm going to open the public hearing. Would the applicant please come forward and state your name and anything else you'd like to add about your project?
Good evening, commissioners. My name is Ray Young, and I'm speaking on behalf of my wife Tian. So we actually run the business together. So I'm more like in charge of the operation side, and she is the Pilates instructor, and she will be in the space to teach the Pilates sessions. So this is the first time I'm here. So, and as you can see from the proposed floor plan, so we're gonna use this as a private session, like 1-to-1 or 2-to-1 Pilates sessions. And most likely, since she will be only the one Pilates instructor in the space, so we will most likely have like 2 to 3 sessions per day, or the most of 4 sessions per day. So, and we won't do any like interior instruction or construction or interior like modifications on the site. So we just put 2 reformers inside and 1 Cadillac table inside and 1 barrel. That's it. And the other like small furnitures for the resting. So that's it. So I'm here to answer any question you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the applicant?
Just a quick question. Do you have air conditioning? Or do you have air conditioning in the unit? Do you know? Air conditioning? In the unit?
Air conditioning?
Mhm.
It's from the building.
And-
So it's there when we rent the space.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And you can independently operate it, or is it for the whole floor?
There is a panel, control panel inside the space.
Oh, great. So you have your own thermostat and you can
I think so.
control it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And those windows are operating windows as well.
The 2 window, yeah, it's basically it's in front of on the street side.
Right. And they operate.
Mhm.
They're not fixed.
Yeah, it's operating. Yeah.
I'm just thinking about ventilation here.
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
yes, yeah. It can be open or closed. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, do we have any members of the public attending in person who wish to speak on this item, or did we receive any public comment emails?
We received no emails.
Okay, then we will close the public hearing. Commissioners, do we have any comments, motions?
Seems pretty innocuous, and I'll go ahead and even though I couldn't find the place, now I know where you are.
It's on the
Sorry.
upper floor.
Yeah, now
Uh-huh.
duh.
Uh,
I know the building so well, so any.
Yeah, the building is beautiful.
Yes, beautiful.
Uh.
So, then I'll make is this for a motion, this one? Then, okay.
Correct.
I'll make a motion to approve this item as proposed.
I second that motion.
Great. We have a motion of approval by Commissioner Pfaff, seconded by Commissioner Say. Any discussion? No? May we please have a roll call vote?
Commissioner Camerado,
Aye.
Commissioner Pfaff,
Aye.
Commissioner Schmid,
Aye.
Commissioner Say,
Aye.
Acting Vice Chair Shores,
Aye.
and Chair Lowenthal.
Aye. The motion passes 6-0-0-1. An action by the Planning Commission is appealable to the City Council within 10 days of the Planning Commission's action. If the Planning Commission's action has not been appealed or called up for review by the City Council by 5 p.m. on the 10th day, the action becomes final. In order to be effective, appeals must be in writing and must be accompanied by an appeal fee of $784, which includes noticing costs. Congratulations and good luck.
Thank you, commissioners. Thank you, Amelia. Thank you for your help.
Okay.
Have a good evening.
Luck.
Have a good evening.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Bye-bye.
All right, agenda item number 10, design review study items. There are none. Agenda item number 11, commissioner reports.
Commissioner.
I would just note that Commissioner Pfaff and I were at the Broadway interchange this morning, listening to our,
Yes, that's what I wanted to say.
there was a press conference regarding the grade separation
Yeah,
project.
because they took our money back. They gave it and then they took it back.
Yes.
Yeah, the government, Newsom.
California,
we
had a
want it back.
big budget shortfall, so they're taking money
It just
and find it.
money back that was promised. This is like 30, I think Donna said, Mayor Colson said something like 20 years. This has been 30 years because Rosalie has been gone for many and she started it a long, long time ago. So it's probably close to 30 years. And it's the worst crossing in the state is what everybody keeps saying. And I believe it.
Yeah. Is it moving forward?
No,
I
not
don't know.
get our money.
Now,
Because there's no money now.
He's been pulled.
Money's,
I thought it was starting soon too.
2025 is supposed
Yeah.
yeah.
It's $70 million of state funding that then gets a matching grant from the federal government. If they pull the 70 million, then we don't get the matching.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's just
So
incredible.
The big one.
The rug pulled out from under us, pretty much. Yep.
oh, that's horrible.
There were several folks I recognized from the commission, from the big buildings that we've been looking at that were there.
Yeah,
Obviously in support because it majorly affects some of these big buildings.
yeah. And it was very dramatic because when you stand there, which I never stood on that side for a longer period of time, it's frightening, actually. It's worse than being anywhere else. The ground goes and the cars are all over the place. And we even saw a car come up, in the zone where, yeah, they
Well,
were
you're not supposed to.
when the things came down. And anyway, it was,
Happens every day.
happens every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just gonna say I'm going to the training on Thursday. Is it this Thursday?
Yeah, I was just
Oh.
gonna remind, I think there's Commissioner Shores, Say, and Haran have registered. So yeah, Thursday, May 30th,
Mhm.
5:45 at the Burlingame Community Center.
Here.
You don't have to go too far. Yeah.
And those
Public library, right? Oh,
N-
at the community.
Community Center.
community center. And for those who aren't going to that meeting, I couldn't go because I'm giving a presentation on the Easton Edition history, where the whole town of Easton came from. So for the others, in case anyone's interested, but it should be recorded, hopefully.
Yeah, I saw that in the e-news.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the lane room, so.
Too many things happen on Thursday.
Gonna be able to make that training, unfortunately,
Mhm.
because in like 8 hours, I'm gonna be on a plane to
Oh.
Los Angeles because there's a California Preservation Conference that is going on there, and I've signed up for a couple seminars that specifically talk about like housing laws intersecting with affordable housing and adaptive reuse and things like that. So hopefully we'll have something a little bit interesting to bring back, but we'll
That's
see.
great.
I have no idea. Oh,
That's actually really exciting.
hopefully,
Yeah.
it's good. Anyway, that's
Yeah.
Very good. Item 12, directors reports.
Yes, so from the May 20th City Council meeting, there's really no planning related items to report. However, there was a spokesperson from Caltrain who gave a presentation and update to the council on the electrification of Caltrain. So I just wanted to share 2 bits of information. So there's a soft launch happening in August of 2024. And then passenger service starts in September of 2024. So these are converting to all electric trains within the next couple of months. Mhm.
Oh.
Yeah. The interesting tidbit as it relates to the Broadway interchange is that the electrification will allow them to do stops every half hour rather than hourly. So crossing guards will be coming down more often.
Oh, my God.
So,
That's good.
but they are very excited about going to electrification.
Great, thank you. Any future agenda items? No? Okay, then we are adjourned at 10:14.